Hello everyone, welcome to Inside the CCL, Season 4, Episode 4. Nothing too notable happened this week, so the episode name is going to be Subs Week, because we had some subs, I think for maybe the first time this season? I actually don't remember. I mean, maybe technically, and we'll get into that because someone did ask a question about it in regards to Storm's roster. Another good reason to sort of be talking about it. Because it can affect the dynamic of a team to have a longer term sub. So, getting right into it, this week we had Sim versus Diamond Hands, which ended up being a 3-0 for Diamond Hands, although Simplicity came the closest they have ever come to winning a game. On Towers of Doom, they actually looked really solid, and even in Game 3, I think they had potentially a chance. So that's a massive improvement from week 1, where it genuinely felt like they had no chance of winning a game, and even from week 2, where we were just starting to see the start of their experiment of role swapping come to take effect, right? So that's actually huge. Maybe the biggest news of the day, honestly. Storm versus CM. Pretty much an expected result. We had a lot of questions about that series. We also have a lot of questions about sort of the mindset of Storm, which we'll be getting into as we go over that series in depth. Fair amount of depth, actually. I think in one case we actually have to watch a replay to answer the questions. Oxygen versus Granite Gaming. Honestly, this should have been 3-0, but it gave me really valuable educational content. So, win-win, I guess. There's a dynamic in HOTS that most people are not aware of, which is that you can just end the game. It's not, you don't have to get camps or anything. It actually is allowed to just go core and end the game. It's allowed. You're allowed to do it. If the enemy team makes a horrendous mistake in a post-20 team fight. And ooh, wait, Cascon, are you here? We have 7 pages of questions. I think this will run for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, though, because I think I did enough prep. I don't think I'll hit the 3-hour mark today. Wildheart versus 30K is a series that happened. It honestly, every game in that series was pretty close, and I think there's even for a little bit, right? We were even in a situation where I think first pick was winning every game. Am I a liar? So 30K won this game. No, Wildheart was first pick. And I was casting this with Hasu. It felt like whoever won the draft was the team that won the game until game 4. So yeah, this feels like this was first pick, and first pick won. So 30K's already actually broken serve, essentially. If breaking serve was a concept in HOTS. First pick Joe. Is it really just the last? It's the first and the last game where first pick didn't win. It's the first and the last game where first pick didn't win. That's interesting. So in the middle 2. So Wildheart was actually kind of down after game 1. Also in honor of Quacknick's subbing, we have some Zero Ultra. I never remember the name. It's the white can, guys. It's just, you don't need to remember the name. It's the white can. So this first question is actually one that spans the entirety of the weekend. Well, not the entirety of the weekend. It's 4 games. In 4 games this weekend, Hold Your Ground was taken, and Subdue was not taken. And the basic question is, did this get value? Was this awful? Please help. And I went through each individual replay, right? And looked at it. Also, Spazzo was kind enough to make sure his tracker was updated since it was going to be continually picked. So, Infernal Shrines, it was Lauber that took Hold Your Ground. And this is the first week it was taken where the CDR actually mattered. People actually got extra CDR or got an extra use of Hold Your Ground sooner than they would have. This happened 6 times, I believe. Once in one game, once in another game, and then 4 times in one game and 0 times in another game. They absorbed in a total bonus damage absorbed of 1064. This is a little bit deceptive because even though most of these games It absorbed around 1,000 extra damage total throughout the entire course of the game. In one case, it actually saved someone from dying. So in the Storm versus CM series, which is what we're looking at in Game 3, Cursed Hollow, where Make took it. Make, of course, is not normally a tank player. He's a sub in this case. So he got benefit out of the CDR 4 times. None of the CDR mattered. The CDR literally never made a difference. He didn't have to be reactivating D that quickly. He just was reactivating D that quickly because there was brawls happening, and why not? He was taking some damage. And it only absorbed 1,056 damage throughout the course of the game. In one case, I believe I can make an argument that this actually saved him from dying. In one case. I think he definitely would have procced Subdue multiple times, however. And in game 1, where Labra took it on Shrines, in one case, it only... In one activation, it was 11 damage absorbed. So it's like, on a per activation basis, this isn't looking so good. He actually missed a kill because he did not have Subdue. So this is right after it absorbed 11 damage. He gets a nice big two-man condemn here. This would have proc Subdue. I made sure that Punish did hit both heroes. And Ultralist just walks out. 100% he would have died here. Like 100%. With the increased slow and everyone just like turning and autoing him, he's guaranteed to die. That was actually the only time that game that something happened where I was like, this was definitely a missed kill. In the Diamond Hands versus Sim games, however, on Battlefield of Eternity, it prevented 1,205 total damage. 300 of that damage was literally just tanking a minion wave. And he didn't need to be tanking the minion wave. He chose to tank the minion wave. It wasn't really relevant to the game state. And he died once because he didn't have Subdue. He used D and then Falling Sworded in, which was terrible D usage. So we'll give him that. Maybe if he had better D usage, Hold Your Ground would have done more. But he ended up getting a 3-man Subdue on the heroes that killed him, and he already was walking away, but he didn't get away. If he had just walked away, but they had been slowed by 80%, he would have lived. He also missed 2 kills from not having Subdue. Again, similar situation. If they were slowed and everyone had turned and auto them, which they did, the person just would not have gotten out in time. So the amount of damage absorbed is going up, a surprising amount. However, basically every game where Subdue is not taken, it's either leading to a death or leading to someone dying. And there's only one situation where maybe Hold Your Ground did anything to actually save a life, or save Johanna's life specifically, in any of the games this weekend. So is Hold Your Ground good? No. And the funny thing is, I feel like Hold Your Ground could be good. I feel like Hold Your Ground potentially, assuming it's not a shield break, right? It's not good into, for instance, Shattering Throw, because Shattering Throw, just even with Hold Your Ground, does the full shield's worth of damage. But I think if there's a comp where Johanna's shield can specifically be broken with spell damage reliably, so maybe Li Ming, maybe Jaina, these really high damage heroes that are sometimes picked to counter frontline, where you just nuke all the way through her D. In those situations specifically, I think Hold Your Ground could be pickable. But so far, it's been just objectively worse than Subdue in every game it has been played in CCL. And in fairness, it's never been into one of those comps. It's never been into a Jaina. It's never been into anything like that. As to the other part of this question of why are CCL players still taking it, I don't know the answer to that. It's just not... In a lot of ways, making yourself more survivable doesn't make you a better tank, because the tank's job in Heroes of the Storm is to engage, and Subdue works as an engage. So... especially if you're going Falling Sword, which is the next question. There's a psychological factor that stats don't capture. Is the psychological factor that people feel better when they have a giant shield? Like, I don't. The problem is a lot of, like, what percent damage are you thinking of, though? The problem is a lot of percent damage is actually tied to auto attacks, and Joe already has 2 blinds. So, like, auto attacks that are percent damage, it's good in percent damage as long as that percent damage is not auto-based. And that's like a tiny, tiny portion of percent damage. And none of the heroes that, like, that applies to are even meta. So it's very difficult to make that argument. I mean, that's just not true in competitive. In competitive, people absolutely, if you step up as Joe, people will instantly start, like, trying to do damage to you to force you to use D as early as possible, and they'll time out your D and just stop hitting it. That's the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand. In competitive, people won't just dump damage into Joe's shield unless their comp is specifically designed to break Joe's shield. What they'll do is they'll just wait until the shield expires naturally, unless they've specifically built comp to blow up the shield. If they specifically built a comp to blow up the shield, then maybe Hold Your Ground has value, but that's not the scenario. Again, in a lot of the cases of these games, a ton of damage was absorbed from just like a minion wave, right? It's not like it's not like it's players that are doing all this damage that's doing the Hold Your Ground. Sometimes it's PvE, where it's like... in Game 1, it feels like Joe has no engage with Hold Your Ground and Falling Sword. This is another thing that I get really annoyed by as well. I genuinely don't think if you're going to go Falling Sword, you can ever go Hold Your Ground. If you're going to go Falling Sword, whether it's offensively or defensively, because there's still some offensive combos, right? You need to go Subdue to actually have an engage, because Falling Sword is not necessarily a reliable engage. So if you don't go Subdue, but you are going to go Falling Sword, that just seems like such a terrible idea. You're essentially giving up being a tank completely to be a hard-to-kill support. Like, maybe that's okay if there's a supplementary engage in your comp. Like, if you had a Maiev, I would be like, okay, maybe. But even then, if you had a Maiev, I would want the extra slow so that Maiev could A, more reliably get pulls, and B, more reliably get Q resets. Right? I cannot imagine a scenario where I would want Falling Sword and then not want Subdue. I don't think there's a draft where that is realistic. Game 2, what do you think of Diablo in this draft? I would hate to play Diablo. Into Anduin. And of course, the Diablo was 4-5'd, so they already knew the draft, right? I don't like Falling Sword there, though. I think Falling Sword there is completely troll. But there's no combos with it. There's nothing you're worried about cleansing. Like, it's not good. Hanzo, Muradin, Yrel, Anduin are showing. You have Dahaka, Lunara, Brightwing, and you're on Towers of Doom. So the main selling point here, like the absolute main selling point here, is that you have Brightwing. Brightwing, because their Z is a percent-based heal, is really good with Diablo. And Anduin is like a problem for Diablo in a lot of ways. Depending on what ult you go, you can be countered by both of his ults. Like, Protected is actually really good at dealing with Lightning Breath, and Light Bomb is actually really good at dealing with APOC as a counter swing ability. But you have the Brightwing for the percentage-based healing. You have sort of, and bear in mind, this is the game they came the closest to winning so far in their CCL run, right? So it's pretty good. You don't necessarily have a favorable tank matchup. Diablo is pretty good on towers. There's a lot of place where the fights happen. There's a lot of walls. All of the altars have a lot of walls. They don't have like massive percent damage showing. Giant Slayer at 16 is something you're gonna have to be worried about into really good Hanzo players. But for the most part, except for Anduin, you're not too concerned about anything currently showing in their draft. It's sort of fine. And a single counter is not a counter, because if there's only one thing on the enemy team that you're worried about dealing with, you can just sort of focus on the counterplay. Also, Brightwing is pretty good in Anduin, right? So you have that dynamic going for you. And then they pick the Tychus to sort of deny the last pick counter potential. So they have that sort of synergy. But then Thrall gets last picked, and Gothfilth, bless his soul, actually goes Ancestral Wrath, Frostwolf Pack, and Alpha Wolf. And once this combo sort of lines up, the game should be absolutely unplayable for Diablo. And we even have the Giant Slayer coming out of Hanzo. So Diablo should be totally fine in the early game into this comp, but from 7 onwards, it's going to start getting worse and worse and worse for him. But when they picked it, I think it was fine. This question isn't asking anything. It's an excuse for you to rant about Brightwing 7. Pop off, Kev. So, we saw it again this game. And this is Peekaboo. So, the vision area for Peekaboo was substantially reduced. The main use case, in my mind, at the moment for Peekaboo isn't about the vision, because the vision is just so-so. It's really... And there are times when the vision is bad. There have been games in CCL where Brightwing Z'd onto a target and the Peekaboo like showed someone in a bush, and that person was like, oh, they saw me. But they already knew they were in the bush, right? The Brightwing was pre-Zing to like follow up on it and engage, but it didn't work out because Peekaboo showed them. That's not ideal. To say that's not ideal is to engage in an act of great understatement. So sometimes, if you're like setting up to trap, it's a problem, right? And you can see Critical Mist is the majority pick talent so far in CCL this season. It's obviously winning more games, but if you go like look at, bear in mind, if shields get broken, they count as healing, right? If shields get broken, they count as healing. The people that are really performing on Brightwing and really pumping are the people that are basically always going Critical Mist, and the people who are not are not. Now, you know, so it's not necessarily about win rate, right? Like Heavy has a good win rate on Brightwing. There are definitely situations where Peekaboo is gonna be fine. The primary thing that I like to use it into is anti-heal. And in some cases, Critical Miss gets a lot worse if you can't go Magic Spit. If you're forced to go Dream Shot to interrupt altar channels, things like that, it gets worse. But the amount of throughput healing that Critical Miss provides you, in addition to giving you a second sort of oh shit button as a heal, and it doesn't have to cleanse a stun. You can just cleanse a slow. Area slows are very common right now. Lunara has potentially put a slow on anyone. Blaze can put a slow on anyone with oil. Tyrael can put slows on people. Joe can put slows on people, especially if they take subdue. Not to put too fine a point on it. But yeah, the sheer throughput, right? And it gives you some interesting versatility of healing, because Z is ideally going to be used on tanks in team fights to really bounce their health back up. But sometimes someone goes on a backliner, you don't necessarily want to Z the backliner. As long as they have a CC on them, no matter what that CC is, you can just cleanse them. And if you have Magic Spit, that's always fine to do, because you'll get it back relatively quickly. If you don't have Magic Spit, and you have to be a little more conservative with your cleanse. But even in those situations, Critical Mist is just going to do a lot more. So, do you like Brightwing Spellhammer 13 active 20 combo? I feel like it's gave us in a lot of games. I do like that combo, actually. We've only seen it in CCL, I think, once. But it did a lot in the game it was taken. And I know it wasn't this season. We haven't seen it yet this season. So, I just don't think, unless you're specifically into anti-heal, you should be going anything but Critical Mist. And even the anti-heal, there's like a strong argument that you can Z to someone that gets anti-healed, and then you can wait till the anti-heal wears off, right? And do sort of different stuff. So I don't know. I wish, unless there was a really good reason not to go it, I wish people would just always go Critical Mist. Just default to it, and see that it actually is pretty good. Did the Lunara 20 do a lot here? The Lunara 20 did absolutely nothing. So you can make an argument for a 7 shield if you have a strong hyper carry, since it's more reliable single target enable. Nope. Because the cleanse will heal for more. It's just straight up what it is. The only argument for shields over heals is if something will do more damage than the entire health bar of the carry. Which, like, it's not a thing. So this might seem like it's pretty good, bearing in mind that the game wasn't level 20 for very long. This is a level 20 talent, Intensifying Toxin. However, when I looked at the replay manually, the level 20 Lunara actually would have resulted in kills. And there's an argument to be made that the level 20 would have resulted in Lunara not dying. So Intensifying Toxin at 3 stacks, and only at 3 stacks, increases Nature's Toxin damage by 40%. However, Thornwind Vine now applies 2 stacks of Nature Toxin, which gets you closer to that Choking Pollen. There was a Q that went on a target that had been Vines, and they were at 2 stacks from an auto, so they would have been at 3 stacks. That target probably, I believe, would have died. It would have taken one more auto. It's a little bit ambiguous, but I believe that target would have died. So at least one missed kill. I can argue that there's some others, but that one is like pretty straightforward. In addition to that, the 30% increased vision radius, Lunara got flank sundered and died twice in the late game by the Thrall. In one of those cases, the increased vision range would have theoretically allowed Lunara to see the Thrall coming. Would Lunara have been paying attention? Would she have gotten flank sundered anyway? That's ambiguous. But in at least one case, the Lunara player would have been physically able to see the Thrall coming with the ult upgrade. So it missed a kill. It did 1,000 bonus damage over several minutes of game time. Although during that a significant portion of the game time, the Lunara player was dead because they died twice. Isn't that a Wisp thing? Wisp was anchoring bottom side, and Thrall came from the top side around a wall. Because it's not like it's triple melee, right? They can get flanked from multiple angles. You can only cover one with Wisp. One could make the argument that the Bruiser should have been covering that flank, but it's a different question. Sim is not very good at arcing and covering all areas of approach. It's not a skill set that their team excels at yet. But yeah, there's it just wasn't good. It didn't do very much. I really think Intensifying Toxin is only pickable if you're playing for extremely long fights. And, like, this is not... You have a Burst Mage. Like, are you playing for long fights at this point? You can kind of see an interesting argument here that Tychus is the burst damage, Lunara should be, and Lunara is sustained damage. But if Lunara is really playing that way, where you're just trying to get everyone as low as possible so Tychus can instantly get a finish, why just the 20? Why not also go the 7 for spread damage, right? Why not even try out the 16? Like, if your goal is really to just do as much damage as possible as Lunara so that Tychus can finish someone off when they catch him out of position, like, play to that style. But the 20 by itself is just not good. Should simply have tried to blow up one target on that last team on tower. Seemed like they played it slow enough for Diamond Hands to get 20. I mean, they tried. Diamond Hands just didn't give them the opportunity. We see Porky go for mid-wave after the altars are capped. Is it a better play to have him grab top sappers to force Diamond Hand's response and then dig bot for a guaranteed 4v5? So dig is up, by the way. This is a question. So this was a comms issue. And to no surprise, right, 4 Koreans and one guy who doesn't speak Korean, Porky thought the call was to fight mid. Not to, like, just go mid, but to actually actively, we're immediately going to be fighting mid. And then that actually wasn't the call. They didn't do anything, and so he went top. It is a better response, generally, when you're a global offlaner, to go as far away from your team as possible, do something actively on the other side of the map, and then come into the team fight using the global. Also, they're, like, a full level ahead. They can just play for 20. So if they're playing for 20, every lane needs to be soaked. But yeah, it was a comms issue. 4 Korean speakers and an English person. Sim shown signs of life for the first time this season. What do you think changed this game to make them look competitive? As far as I'm aware, every single person was on a hero that they're comfortable playing, which is massive. Also, the offlane on Towers of Doom, in a lot of ways, has the least interaction with the 4-man of any map. Especially as Dahaka, you basically burrow in when your team is being aggressive, and otherwise you're just double soaking. And that's pretty good. Like, for you have this situation where, things happened. It's pretty good. How did anyone's level 4 perform in that game? No one asked this question, actually, but he got 6 stacks. The cutoff, in my experience, for the talent being, like, at all viable is if you get if you get, like, over 5 stacks, it usually was pretty good. If you get less than 5 stacks, you probably shouldn't have picked the talent. So, it worked. And triple melee is really the one scenario where you're very likely to consistently get value, and I consider Tychus to be a melee hero, unless he goes range at 1. If he goes range at 1, I will actually consider him a ranged hero, but since no one goes ranged at 1, Tychus is pretty much always a melee hero. So this is 3 melee heroes, in which case Root should be consistently getting value. Despite a dominant late game, lots of stagger kills, Diamond Hands never managed to secure a 6 cap. Is this a symptom of ultra spawn time, suboptimal macro, or some other factor? And again with the sneeze. Or in the right case, you need the Pierce. If you need the Pierce, you will get stacks. You can always evaluate if the Pierce was good based on whether or not the person got stacks. If someone ends the game with 1 stack, they didn't need the Pierce. It's kind of a hard question to answer because, like, they got top, right? And Dahaka should always eventually get top. Pretty much in every matchup. Because Dahaka will always leave the lane later, and that will always result in chip damage. Dahaka can solo the top camp if he gets an opportunity, and then that pushes in, that gets the thing, right? So, and you can even see, like, mid is more chipped, right? So I don't think it's the macro that's the problem. The problem is that as a game goes along, this is only 4 kills to 3. As a game goes along, death timers get longer, and so even if you've done a bunch of chip damage, you're gonna have problems. Honestly, the main problem was the 4-man didn't get much going on until a little bit later in the game. Like 13 to 12, this is 1 kill to 2. This game is pretty even at this point. However, look at the invades. Right? How many times did Sim cap their own camp? I think it might have been just the first one. And then even this rotation, like they trade camps and they take away Porky's one advantage as being Dahaka, which is that he should be able to get the top camp. No one rotates up to help him, and they don't even shove these in. So they lose both sides of the map right here. And this is the sort of thing you should be doing against a team with comms issues, honestly. Like, play both sides of the map simultaneously. They're not going to rotate. Their comms are going to be confused. And they let this invade happen. So they won 2 out of 3 lanes, but the lane they lost was the 4-man lane. Oh, why didn't Diamond Hands manage to secure 6 out? I mean, it wasn't really that dominant a late game. It was pretty even on kills. Right? 4 kills to 2. Sim is winning right now. I don't... Sim almost lost this game. Or Diamond Hands almost lost this game. I wouldn't call it a dominant late game. That's my bad for not understanding the question. They don't get the 6 cap here, right? But you can't 6 cap if have been losing the other lanes all game, right? Like, Urel had to get top back. She's not going to be able to get this down. In order to reasonably get a 6 cap, you have to have been winning on macro all game and probably as a result losing on shots. But they've been winning on shots for the majority of the game, right? No, they've been losing on shots and losing on macro in the other lanes. It's really just bottom lane that they were winning. They were winning bottom lane very hard, to be fair. Couldn't they play more aggressively, invade the enemy camp with the Dahaka? I mean, they could have done a lot of things with the Dahaka, and they just didn't. Comms. Windrush plus Light Bomb look like a potent combo this game. Would you classify this as a cheesy combo that gets neutered by cleaner, more disciplined play, or underexplored form of engage post 20? I don't know if it's underexplored. Light Bomb blinks are something that's pretty well established in competitive play. You just can never clump. And if you ever do clump, then you get light bombed. And it doesn't even need to be a blink. It can just be something that really fast moving, like a Genji E, and then it even works plus 20. Oxygen did that in our series. It's not cheesy. It's just how you have a giant area stun with the wind up. How do you? Right? Clumping is basically one of those things that's literally always bad. So you always have to... one of the best ways to fix any team's play, actually, is to just learn to never clump. Or if you do clump for some reason, like everyone has to go in on a kill, you immediately spread back out. Noblesse, who's the coach for Genji, did an interview once, and he said 80% of what he did was drafting, but the other 20% was telling people not to clump. And that's a real quote from him. So, clumping is real bad. But every time the enemy does clump, you should find ways to punish it. Game 3. Should Tychus have taken spell armor? Alex means in shambles. Actually, it's one of the reasons that Alex is tough to play in competitive, is because it does encourage clumping. So the reason people go spray and pray is because Tychus has a pretty basic combo, which is your tank CCs someone, you auto attack them with your D. The person is probably not dead and starts to run away because they're low on health. You grenade them back into your team, ideally. And then you just start queuing them because Tychus can't really auto-attack a moving target. Stutter stepping is Tychus. You cannot stutter step as Tychus without clipping your autos. You will always lose some damage. So you just queue them. The slow and the range combined allow you to do more damage with your Q, hopefully finishing off the kill. I have seen the slow secure an actual kill like once, and the game was like perfect for it. Everyone was completely immobile, and therefore the slow got extra value because it's not like there were movement abilities, right, that they could just deny the slow. It was actually pretty insane. It's also, Spray and Pray does damage, right? The other two talents don't do damage. So a lot of CCL players who are very aggressively focused really like to have the slow. No one asked, but I will answer that legacy for you if you like. However, you can do more damage when you're not dead. Defensive talents are sometimes the best damage talents. And 75 spell armor is like an unreasonable amount of spell armor. Imperius does a lot of spell damage. Brightwing does, or Diablo does a lot of spell damage. Hanzo does a lot of spell damage, especially with Q build. Like, this was obviously a game where you 100% should have gone the spell armor to be able to play aggressively. And the thing about taking the spell armor, Tychus died twice this game. I think one of these would have been prevented by the spell armor. But the thing about taking the spell armor is it allows you to play more aggressively and not be worried about the counter swing. And because Tychus is a low range hero, being able to step up aggressively and then, oh yeah, not die is pretty massive. So I don't like Spray and Pray in general. It's just something that situationally I think is a fine talent. There's even been a meta in Korea. We saw it during the last Korean only tournament that was organized, where Tychus players were actually going Q13, 16, and 20 into comps where the enemy heroes were all squirrels and you couldn't really auto attack them because they were all faster than you. It was like Tyrael, Tracer, Genji, like those kinds of heroes. And Q kind of allows you to keep up with them, but like Neo Steel Coding should be the default talent. You should just go Neo Steel Coding the majority of the time. Spray and Pray is extremely niche. I think it should be taken in maybe 15 to 20% of games. Mouth talents. So this is without Q4, right? So Q4 means Malphite has a Q on himself. The big thing to consider here is that Dragon's Arrow is huge. It's a huge area stun. APOC is an insane follow-up. There's a lot of stuns. Malph will obviously never be able to cleanse himself. So, in theory, if Malph always plays completely safe, which he has to do into this comp anyway, he'll never need a Q.
This. However, yeah, if you're not going to go Q4, you really need to go increased Q duration at 16. Because it's just not realistic. Eventually, you're going to eat some poke from like Hanzo arrows or whatever. You're going to need some self-sustain on yourself. So I don't like the 16. I think in the abstract, this is fine to take because in the early game, you really shouldn't need to have Q rolling on yourself if you position perfectly. Spoiler, June did not position perfectly this game. He actually had one really bad rotate. But actually, overall, his positioning was pretty good, right? It was actually like very solid. And he's not going to run out of mana. And I think, honestly, this might be an adaptation to the way his team plays. Storm brawls a lot. Like, a lot. And so having Revitalize means that even in extremely long fights, he'll be totally fine on mana. And into triple melee, he'll be spamming W to, like, get massive healing numbers, right? And W usage over Wing can actually result in too much healing. Or, too much mana usage, and you have to sort of balance it out. So there's that. However, not having the movement speed means you're more likely to get hit by all this crap that's a problem for you. So, I don't like it this game. Plus, there's not really a target that you're like, oh yeah, that target needs an innervate, right? One of the main targets we actually see that should be innervated in competitive play. First of all, innervate is not a mana talent. You don't take innervate. You don't use innervate for the fact that it gives mana. That's just a bonus. You actually ideally are using innervate for the CDR. So you'll like Stitches missed a hook. You innervate Stitches so the hook comes back up faster, and that messes with the enemy team's internal tracking. Jaina really can't kill people with that Blizzard. You innervate Jaina after she Blizzards. Now you have a larger window where you can look for a kill off of Blizzard. Sylvanas, not really long cooldowns. Tychus, not really long cooldowns. Joe, especially without Subdue, doesn't even have an engage in her base kit. It's whatever. Blaze, sure, you can innervate a Blaze. Blaze has a bunch of stuff going on where, but that's the off lane. You're taking a full build here. You gotta have someone in the 4-man that's like worth innervating. So I didn't like it too much. I also didn't like the 16 choice along with it. Yeah, I don't think that build is bad for the record. I mean, again, I don't like the 16. I just don't think it was good that game. Yeah, but Blaze already gets massive. Like, the average amount of CDR that a good Blaze gets in a game, especially with the Crossfire, is just change in mid-baseline is just enormous. He doesn't really need help from Malf. Actually, that's a good point, though. More Q spam will reduce the cooldown of a straight more. I actually think reducing the CD of Q matters more. Almost. But yeah, it's not... You don't take innervate build to innervate the offlane. Like, even though the offlane will be with you in full-on 5v5s later on, it's just so clunky. So I think the answer to this question is no, but I want to clarify what the question is. Gank Blaze on E at 43 seconds says, Blaze die if got filth prizzes Blaze's E. Prizzes is a verb that some people... How much does Slapper missing playing BBJ? I need to ask him. So Priz was, at least on Oxygen, pretty famous for consistently doing things like if he was a Cassia and Leoric E'd, he would fend Leoric as E was ending, so his fend would follow to the correct location. He was really good at doing it into Lucio Z. He was really good at doing it into, like, tons of stuff. No one saw this, but I once saw him do... This wasn't in a game, but I once saw him do it. He queued a Sylvanas as her E was out. And if you queue a Sylvanas mid-E, like before, like in a couple frames of her taking the E, it will actually follow it to the rival location of the E. Right? Priz was very good at doing this. Like, very good at doing this. So, for people who have seen that, they're like, they Prizzed it. It's fine. So the question here is... If you Dark Flight the E, so if you don't go in right away, so Got Filth just instantly Dark Flights, goes into Worgen form on the Blaze for the wall stun. If he holds that and does it on the E, does Blaze die? Because he'll be able to run him down. Because once you've used your Gap Closer, you just don't have another Gap Closer. However, yeah. Rhett got it. However... Gotfilth is not the problem here. Gotfilth is fine. Hogger is the problem here. Nintori needs to walk this way. The way you gank a Blaze is always to look for the body block. If Nintori immediately walks to here, this E doesn't get him out.
So yes, I think he would die if Gotfilth played perfectly there, but there was a much easier play that could have been made by Nintori, which is just body block the place. And you can see, like, it would have made a massive difference if Grandman had been able to continuously auto him after Dark Flighting the E. But body block, more important. And I believe, I'm actually going to go to the replay so I can show you guys just how many mistakes were made there. So here's the thing, Nintori even has spin here. Nintori could literally have spun this way to gap close, or to block the bush if he wanted to, and like it's already gonna happen. Hogger trait was close to being up, by the way. If Hogger trait had been up, then I would have expected to see a Hogger trait in the choke. That would have been fine-ish as well. But you can visibly see, like, Nintori could easily have walked into the body block, right? And it shouldn't matter if Muradin maybe would have gotten the body block. When you are going to try to kill someone, and the major exceptions are like Mathael, Chen. Because if you body block a Chen, that gives him a Q that gets him out. If you body block a Mathael, he can W to the other side of you, and that gives him an out. But for heroes that don't have these body block deniers, essentially, you should immediately be trying to body block. And then to spin it, and he actually used spinning, and spinning into being weird. I hear an ants spinning in this direction. Diamond take their DK mid keep with a wall rather than head core being open bot lane. Is it too early to look to end with objective or an overly conservative push towards mid keep? It's if this was 14-17, right? If this was 14-17, you could group as 5 and potentially go to core. But having someone in the Dragon Knight in a full-on 5v5 team fight can actually be a significant detriment. It in some ways, other than the kick, the Dragon Knight's not that good in team fight, so it's almost a 5v4. Right? But they're not 14-17. They're 15 and a tiny little bit to 17. So Simplicity's gonna get 16. It's not that it's too early to end, it's that the game is too close to end. Right? So rather than inting the Dragon Knight for not a lot of benefit, they go to mid keep, they get the mid keep wall, this gets them closer to 20. It does force the enemy team to fight in a position that's not necessarily that good or that bad, right? It's just they play around the Dragon Knight, they get some chip damage, you know, they have buttons, they push the buttons. If they get a kill, then maybe they can end, or maybe they get the keep. It's not too conservative. I think that going core there would honestly have been too aggressive, if anything. And it puts you closer to 20, and at 20, you get a Dragon Knight. You can usually kind of walk. You can usually just walk core. It's also worth noting that the Dragon Knight scales over time. A 12-minute Dragon Knight is nowhere near as strong as like a 20-minute Dragon Knight. If you get to 20, and unless the enemy... like, there have been games in competitive where a 20-minute Dragon Knight has ended like 1v3. Like, 4 people on your team are dead, but you got a DK. There's 3 people alive on the enemy team. You just walk core, and in 1v3, they can't kill at a time, and the core just dies. So game time matters a lot for what you can do, as well as, you know, as well as the lanes, as well as the level difference. Storm versus CM. Moving along. 420. I feel like this question was asked just because something happened at 420, but we'll let it slide. Chili Mountain have to hawk a dig into bot lane, committing 5 people for first objective defense, securing 2 kills, and still losing the fort. In return, they lose at least 1.5 waves in top, along with their full fort. While is this trade worthwhile? No. So it's a Frozen Punisher. Frozen Punisher, by the way, is the one most likely to get a fort. Even though Mortar Punishers actually on average do the most structure damage, Frozen Punishers are the ones most likely to get a fort, because you freeze a fort, minions don't die, minions do triple damage to structures, everyone's happy except the people losing the fort. The wall was also already like pretty partially damaged. Also, melee heroes suck at defending pushes. One of the main things you have to acknowledge whenever you go a triple melee comp is you're gonna have a really hard time defending any push, and Hanzo in particular is not a range that's good at defending pushes. So Storm Esports can run it. Chili Mountain really needs to scale in order to have any chance of winning this game, and in order to get scale, you need to be soaking. So you don't really generally want to not be soaking when you have a comp that's just better later on. So they get the dig. And by the way, Lauber dies here because he tanks a tower shot in the brief window where the fort was not turned off. He probably would have lived there if not for the tower shot. And Hold Your Ground did not save him. It did not. And it would not have. The overkill was higher than the Hold Your Ground shield amount. And honestly, as soon as the dig happens, because the Haka digs into the flanking bush, June's out of mana. This is really important. When Malfurion is out of mana, or any healer, if your healer is completely out of resources, you can no longer take the fight. Healers are literally the most important hero in team fights, by far. It's not close. Healers are what decide if you can fight in many cases. So if your healer's completely out of resources, you just need to leave anyway. So like this dig honestly happens at a moment where everyone on Storm should just be leaving anyway. And instead they literally die to a tower. So it's a bad dig, but Storm misplayed to make it a good dig. Or make it an okay dig, even. You can't depend on the thing is you can't depend on the enemy team misplaying when you make calls. Unless they're like comms where like, hey guys, Storm's gonna run it, let's dig in and get some kills. But that would be incredibly disrespectful. CM drops out of vision and show up with 4 heroes to invade Storm's bruiser camp. Both of Storm's tanks are chilling in lane, which feels like an uncharacteristically poor control of vision for CCL level play. How could Storm have better rotated control vision to prevent the successful invade? Who is the single best single player in CCL using whatever metrics? That's an impossible question. So here's the thing about Joe. Joe really controls vision primarily by making sure lanes are shoved, not by like actively warding in bushes. Because minions as they push up get vision. If the enemy team is not clearing the wave, then you know that they're invading. And I cannot give any thoughts on the Sylph Towns. Sylph is I just need to make like a video of Sylph Talents. Jesus Christ. I could literally spend an hour talking about Sylph Talents. I'm not exaggerating. Sylph has one of the most ridiculously complicated kits, especially when you can factor in her talents, of any hero. It's stupid. So Blaze is going bottom to catch. This is by the way what the offlane should be doing in general. The offlane goes to the opposite lane of where the team is. So the camp is here. Joe is mid, and Blaze goes bottom because it's the far lane from where the team is. However, this invade is pretty slow, honestly. Like, they can easily potentially look for counter kills here. They have Blessed Up. Oh, wait, no, they don't. It's Falling Sword. They could have Blessed Up. They have the same cooldown. And then they just lose the camp. But to put this in perspective... Chili Mountain. One of the things I asked Spazzo to add to his stat tracking is how often the enemy team is in vision. So time unhurt and alive, time in vision. Time in vision basically just means they're visible on the minimap. So they could be showing to a wave, they could be showing it's to a wisp, it doesn't matter. As long as the enemy team has vision of you, you're counted as showing in vision. It's a little bit wonky for heroes like D.Va and Vikings because of some issues with them, but for most heroes it's pretty straightforward. 926, right? We'll go over here. Time of vision 1104. Make's not a tank main, by the way. And it's hard to make an apples to apples comparison because different takes will spend different amounts of time in vision based on whether or not they're walling or actually warding. But like, for instance, this is Benny on Johanna. Time in vision 1034. This game was an 18-minute 56 game, right? This game was 20 minutes. So Labber spent more time in vision on Johanna than Benny did on Johanna in a just marginally longer game, right? But if you compare Lauber's time in vision on like ETC, ETC in season 2, I believe, Lauber literally had a game on Dragonshire where he spent more than twice as much time in vision as Benny did on ETC in a similar length game. So Lauber spends a lot of time in vision regardless of what tank he's on, right? And we can even see like the Cursed Hollow game. 16-minute game, he spent 9 minutes 18 seconds in vision. And Breeze is maybe a little washed, right? So this is a 16-minute 13-second game. Breeze is maybe a little washed, but time of vision 1055. Actually more. Breeze, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm really sad about that. But yeah, in general, Storm probably controls vision the worst of any CCL team. And in fairness, it's not like an accident. Storm, Lauber in particular, has an opinion that you don't need to control vision if you're just fighting the enemy team. And if you fight the enemy team, you're going to be in vision more often because you're fighting the enemy team, as opposed to looking for traps or warding rotations or controlling things, stuff like that. Which, it's not like Lauber never does those things. He just does them less often than some other tanks. And it's not like he's never had competitive success doing that. So it's hard to argue that he's wrong, right? I don't like doing that. I think at a high level, HOTS is very much a game about information. And the less information you give the enemy team while getting as much information as possible, the better situation you're going to be in. But there's an argument that just brawling and out and keeping track of cooldowns better, mechanicking better, positioning better in fights is going to lead to 1 games. But it will result in your camps getting invaded with no counterplay. In some cases. With a half a level lead and a talent disadvantage, Storm opt to 5-man their bruiser camp. Should they be looking for a more aggressive way to press their advantage? How has this time in vision changed when teams he's been on? Wouldn't be surprised if it changed a bit. It's pretty much similar across all his teams. It's just how Lauber plays the game. This is not like an accident, right? Lauber is not like, shucks, I didn't know tanks are supposed to be out of vision. He doesn't agree. he plays the game differently. And it's, Lauber has been on many successful teams. It's not that Lauber is bad. It's just that he has a different opinion. I don't agree with his opinion, but it's hard to look at his success historically in HOTS. He's been on many teams. Lauber was in HGC and got dropped by his team and then made it back into HGC via Crucible, and then HGC didn't happen. So he played 1 split of HGC. With a half level lead and talent tier advantage, Storm opt to 5-man their bruiser camp. Could they should be looking for a more aggressive way to press their advantage? I mean, it's not that big an advantage. Right? Yeah, bow tie guy wearing a bow tie. That's me. It's only half a level lead. Like, especially without Blessed, what are you going to do? Walk at the enemy team, find them, and then not stun them? And then they just walk away? Like, theoretically, you have a brief window here where you could try to, like, look for a very aggressive pick if you had Blessed Shield, but you don't. So I think what they did was fine. They timed out their bruiser camp. They try to win a 16 versus 16 fight. Not having an engage, they don't even have to do. Not having an engage means that looking for a pick is like very unrealistic. And picks and forcing fights and getting picks is generally how you press an advantage. But they can't do that. Despite having a tap advantage with their top fort still alive, Storm opts to take a dry fight over the objective. Is this a symptom of actually not having a moment to disengage for their pre-taps or an execution misplay? How would you rate Storm's vision play generally? I kind of answered that question already. So here they have the lane advantage already. They can literally just back up. They have the minion wave pushing up. They should have, like, Blaze should not even have come. So Swamp steps up here. But Swamp should just be starting the objective. Right? They're playing for the vision advantage in the lane. They're not playing for fight. They have a comp that's going to win the shrine. It's wrong to even try to look for the fight. So that's a really bad play by Swamp, not starting the objective right away. Because you can see Swamp alone on the objective in a couple seconds gets like 6 shrine minions. Right? So if he'd had 2 more seconds, he'd be at 12. Like, he would basically already be done. And now the camp is pushing up, and Swamp continues to stay on the shrine, which is where he should be. So Swamp, let's say Swamp got only 5. Let's say he should be at 15 right now, right? And then they Odin. They get bullied off, so they Odin. Now they're the bullies. Labra steps up, clears the wave. Catapult pressure is the thing. So the time they could have backed up and everyone tapped is when they popped Odin. Everyone could have backed up and tapped with the Odin, and then they bully their way back on with the Odin. Also, if they'd been focusing on the shrine the whole time and never focused on the thing, they'd have at least 5 more shrines killed, so they'd be at 29 out of 13 right now. And again, look how they all funnel into this choke, which forces them to clump. Imagine if they were just like, oh, they left. We win the shrine. Let's just focus on the shrine, and had never focused it, forced into the clump, and then that happened. It ended up working out. They got multiple kills. The shrine finishes right now if Swamp doesn't do that posturing. And they won that fight, but look how low they ended up being. If they had all pre-tapped, forget it. Like, there's just no chance they even lose. Yeah, right after using Bunker, which would also been another good moment to disengage Chap. Like, once you've used a bunch of cooldowns, it's okay to back up. If you go and you miss, a lot of people have like a sunk cost fallacy of like, oh, we used all these cooldowns, we better keep going. But what if you just didn't? What if you like shot your shot, missed, and you're like, I'm gonna back up and reload. Just wait one second. This is called a 2-stage fight, by the way. It was very common in HGC. In HGC, people would even draft around it. Fnatic had comps they would draft where every heroic had a 60-second cooldown, and they would draft it into comps where every cooldown was like 80 seconds or more. So they would use all their cooldowns, and then they would immediately, like at 55 seconds after, so 5 seconds left on all their heroics, they would start looking for another fight. So that's like the ultimate version of the 2-stage fight, where you use all your cooldowns that are shorter cooldowns than enemy teams, and then you wait until like 5 seconds for all your cooldowns up, you start looking for the fight, you find the fight, you have all your heroics, and they don't have any of their heroics. But a 2-stage fight can literally be like 10 seconds, right? You use things, you miss, you back up, you wait till your stun's back up, you re-engage, and 10 seconds later. Like, it doesn't have to be. But there are versions of the 2-stage fight that are insane. And tap usage is not good. Dignitas actually had a window where on some maps they would all tap at the same time. So all of their taps were synced. And they would all pre-tap first wave. and then they would all pre-tap Immortal on BoE, and then they would all tap right after Immortal phase on BoE and push with the pre-tap. Like, literally, they would sync their taps. That was a thing that happened in competitive. That was an HGC team doing that. We haven't really seen even good individual tap usage consistently across every player in CCL, much less team-wide. So I'm not too surprised that Storm didn't pre-tap there, but they definitely should have. In fact, one of the main advantages of Spaz's UI, by the way, is it shows the tap timer at the top. I do really kind of wish CCL would use Spaz's UI. It might be a lot of information for casual viewers, but for people who are watching the games. What do you think of the camp invade by Storm at the end of the game? So they've gotten 2 kills, or they got killed twice, right? It's a little too cluttered. So they actually are out, by the way. Like, they literally... I don't know. Maybe have an alternate clean feed with the UI. I don't know. Obviously, that would be nearly impossible with the way they're doing production. But I think for people who have a little bit more of a nuanced understanding of the game and understand that tap is a valuable cooldown to be tracking, it would be very helpful. And it's not too bad, right? So the assumption here is they lost the shrine. There's no way they can get it. The camp is up. This camp will help. If Chili Mountain gets this camp, it helps de-push the lane, and this is a massive issue, right? As long as these catapults are pressuring, Storm Esports will always, like, Chili Mountain will always have to deal with backdoor pressure, right? So, and the camp can help mitigate it. So stealing the camp away is actually not a terrible decision. And you can see Tychus is actually wondering if this is a good idea, right? Tychus is like, I'm not sure this is a good idea, guys. I don't want to do anything insane. So he's giga late. Messes up a little bit there. Q's 1 target. Q is actually less damage single target, unless you're the Q16, which he's not. So they start to back there. If they had literally just mounted and ran, I don't think any of these kills happen. So I think the call is honestly fine. I think if they execute it better, nothing could possibly go wrong here. But instead, they just die. How long was Tychus not on the camp when he could have been? No, this is a situation where anchoring doesn't matter, because anchoring is only a thing that matters when you're worried about potentially taking a fight. Yeah, Tychus is with them, right? He's maybe 1 second behind them. So they start the camp 1859. Tychus wastes 3 seconds of not doing the camp. I think this is just a timing thing. If you just do that, like if you make that call and you just rip it, you'll be fine. Also, backing is giga greedy, right? And like the wave is pushed up, right? There's no minion wave here to reveal them. If they had just all mounted and run this way, they would have been out. I think it was poor execution. I don't think it was necessarily a bug call. Sins exposed. No conviction with falling sword. Yeah, so again, this should not have been falling sword in my opinion. This should have been blessed shield. Sins exposed actually did a fair amount this game. The anti-heal number was 6,973. 2 of those, like literally over 1,000 damage of that was this, like there was one single Brightwing Z plus Diablo W combo that over 1,000 healing was prevented. So if you think of anti-heal as damage, which you should, anti-heal is damage. If your tank did 1,000 burst damage at any point in the game, you'd be like, yes, please, thank God. Give me some of that. Give me that sweet, sweet damage. Same thing for Emerald on like Deckard. If Deckard anti-heals someone and it does 1,000 or more anti-heal, you're like, I got 1,000 burst out of my healer. Can I have more of that? So anti-heal is actually pretty good. Generally in competitive, what I've found is that 40% is sort of the cutoff for where anti-heal is consistently useful, even into non-burst supports. But Brightwing is a burst support. The main problem with Joe's anti-heal is that you're not generally going to be auto-attacking, so you're not going to... Next thing he'll say is displacements or damage. You're not going to generally get too much value. But in this game, it actually got a ton of value. Like, a ton of value. And it's, you know, it's the self-healing from Dahaka, it's the self-healing from Imperius, it's the self-healing from Diablo, it's the massive burst heal from Brightwing Z on all of those, right? It's the fact that they're all melee. This is a game where I actually think Sins Exposed was correct, but also it should have been Bless Shield Subdue. So, and honestly, it would have, the Subdue would have allowed him to get autos off that he didn't get off, and that would have refreshed it, so Sins Exposed would have gotten even more value if he'd been Subdue. But then he wasn't. And the reason that it's really important... I don't know if I'm a Giga Chat, because I don't exactly know what that means. The reason that you really need to go Conviction whenever you're going to go Falling Sword is the movement speed from Conviction works when you're in Falling Sword. So you get that 10% permanent movement speed, which allows you to position better. It allows you to move and respond to enemy team's movement a little bit better. I generally, as a rule of thumb, if I see Falling Sword without Conviction, I just generally assume it's wrong. But I think this should have been a Bless game. So this is a really important thing about team fighting, and it actually ties fundamentally into why offlanes are melee. You guys might not know this, but in like 2014, 2015, and 2016, offlaners were not melee heroes. They were sometimes, but generally speaking, they were actually frequently ranged. Zagara versus Thrall was... Actually, someone asked a question about that, Venosti. If you stick around, we'll actually get to that. Zagara versus Thrall was like a meta matchup that happened constantly in competitive. So one of the reasons that people ended up going to melee offliners wasn't just that melees are safer. It's that melees do something in fights that range really can't, which is anchor flanks and present more threats and more zoning potentials. So in fights, generally speaking, you want your melee heroes to play opposite sides of the fight so that it's really hard to approach your backliners who are relatively fragile and kill them. So like this initial position is really good. Labra's controlling this bush. Johanna always wants to be controlling this bush on mid shrine because she wants to be able to step out and clear the wave and then come back in. So you play through the lane to get vision advantage. And generally you want your offlaner, your melee hero to be controlling this arc, right? And it might be different. If this were not a wave clear, if this weren't Joe and this was like Murden might want to play up here and Blaze would play down here so he could play through the lane. You just want to be able to play through the lane so that the minions push up and you have a little bit of a vision advantage from the mid lane. So right at 8-10, Swamp and Lauber both step up to this same choke. And as a result, there's a good chance that they get hit by the same things. Like Dino, like if they had stayed there, Dino would have gotten hit by the scatter. And here's the thing, they stay clumped. They stay clumped. One of the things, sometimes you have to clump. Sometimes you go for something, you're just going to be on top of each other. But if you go and you miss, you have to spread back out, right? But from that moment onward, they stay clumped in this fight. And like this is the time. This is the first time they've split since then. So this is a good thing to do, by the way. When you're retreating, go in opposite directions with your melee heroes, so it's easier to spread back out. And Swamp changes his mind, goes back here. Lauber sort of fixes the problem with Falling Sword. But like Lauber fixed the problem with Falling Sword, right? Note the phrasing there. It wouldn't have been a problem if they had just stayed spread. If they had, we went and we missed. Because Blaze was sort of on the bottom side, if Blaze goes down and Joe goes up, they can reestablish their positioning. It's a very hard thing to do consistently. Sometimes teams, depending on the match, will play like man. So there's a basketball analogy I always like to use, which is that sometimes you're playing zone defense, where it's your job to be warding a particular area, and you just go back to it whenever things are ambiguous. And sometimes you play man-to-man defense, like D.Va should always be on URL in a D.Va versus URL game. D.Va should just be on URL. But if you have like Blaze versus URL and your main tank is a Muradin, you can make a strong argument that the Muradin should always be the one looking for the URL and trying to sort of corral her, and the Blaze should always be frontlining for the team. You can translate an analogy into soccer fairly well for EU people, by the way. Oh, that's good to know, actually. I don't know much about soccer, so it's hard for me. But and it's one of those things that you should go over at the start of the game if you're playing on a competitive team, so you know what your positioning is. And clumping is just bad. I think that analogy plays in any team game. That analogy might well apply in any team game. As an exercise for chat, can you guys think of a team game where it doesn't work? I mean, I guess in team games where it's technically a team game, but people play in rounds. Oh, that doesn't work too either, right? Because you're, I don't know. How would you rate CPX Hogger on the Hanzo scale? This is an interesting question. So Hogger's not a hero. Even though I played a lot of Hogger, Hogger's not a hero necessarily where I just have straight up clear objective measurements for what you shouldn't be doing as Hogger. It is much more complicated because Hogger is a hero where your talents significantly impact what you should be doing. The comp significantly impact what you'd be doing. 4-man Hogger is even a little bit different of a beast, which is what CPX is playing, of course, because they actually have offlane plays. It's hard to know if you're doing things correctly. Things I tend to look for are pummel value. Did you get pummels off on the correct targets in fights? Did you do slow spins to start out? Are you getting wall stuns? If you're Hortipult, are you using Hortipult correctly to block chokes? Are you coming out on the right side of the Hortipult? Because frequently what people will do is they'll come out on the same side of the Hortipult as the person they're Hortipulting onto, and then you have to move to get the wall stun. That's not ideal. Ideally, what you'd want to do is Hortipult onto someone who's next to a wall on the far side of the Hortipult, and then stun them into the wall, and then spin on them, and actually, ideally, you would use the terrain from the Hortipult to bounce the spin onto them. I should have a clip of myself doing that. Wait. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about, because that might not be... The words may not be clear. So this is just a random ladder game that I was playing with my NGS team. So I'm gonna kill the rag. Well, I'm gonna kill the rag by doing an advanced version of the spin, but the start of the spin is very basic, right? So I Hortipult onto the rag. Notice I'm past him. By the way, always go garbage fire if you're gonna go Hortipult, because the slow enables this exact play in a way that the other 7 talents just won't matter with. I get the wall stun onto the rag, and then I spin on him after throwing the W, and I spin onto him, and notice that my spin's gonna bounce on the Hortipult. And if he had just stayed there, my spin would have hit him twice. But I did an insane version of this spin, which took me a lot of practice, where I used the spin to go that way and then bounce back into him. And again, all enabled by garbage fire. If he wasn't slowed by garbage fire, it wouldn't have worked. It does also work always at 13, even without garbage fire, because if you get the pummel slow correctly. Yeah, I actually meant to spin that way. I have almost 1,000 games on Hogger across multiple accounts at this point. How did you spin that way off the garbage? I practiced lining it up really quickly, over and over and over again. So you can see, like, it's not like an instant spin. But it's pretty close. And there's just like, and this is why it's so hard to evaluate. No, it's just geometry. I'll show you guys another clip that I actually recorded today for a tech that I've been working on. I call this the hot gates. It's another Hortipult tech. Wow, what? Why is that happening? So I call this the hot gates. So this is sort of an interesting play you can make where you use Hortipult plus your trait to completely block a choke. This also works on gates, and you Hortipult past the choke in case you get a wall stun, in case they miss position, and then so you essentially you end up using it to split the team fight in half, right? And then this choke is not walkable. Heroes cannot go through this. But your hitbox when you spin is smaller than a normal hitbox, so you can spin back through this. It's just like, there's a lot of stupid things you can do with Hogger. The hero, honestly, is not completely explored. And then it's not enough to find the things that you can do with the hero. You have to then be able to execute them, right? So the practice comes in. Yeah, that is just stupid. There's stuff, right? So I'm really picky about Hogger players. So CPX honestly didn't play Hogger that badly this game, though. You should play in CCL. I actually have a 100% win rate as a sub on Hogger in scrims for when I have been forced to sub in CCL games because someone couldn't make it. I've only ever lost playing tank in CCL subs. I got massively outplayed by Benny. I did actually kill 1v unaverted in a 1v1 on ladder the other week. That is a true statement. He was playing Euro. It's probably Liam. Hogger play. So CPX actually played pretty well this game. He got some good spins. He got a fair number of wall stuns. He got a lot of damage from his wall stuns. He didn't get as many wall stuns as he could have, I think, is the best way to put it. But every wall stun he went for, he got, which is a good metric, right? Like, he was very conservative in his play. I do think you have to be very conservative with Hogger because he is relatively fragile. You have to really pick your moments to go in. And honestly, the worst play he made all game I think it was 17. Yeah, it's right here. This is the worst play he made all game. I can go back to 310 at the top kill if you would like to talk about it. So you have, you know where the Stukov is, right? And he actually, to be fair, Hortipult's over the wall. I want him to Hortipult to interrupt the silence. Because if you displace with a loot horde, it actually will interrupt. And I want him to then, again, Hortipult past the Stukov and wall stun him, and then do this spin in. That would have been substantially better. But like, that was the worst thing he did all game, was just not maximizing Hortipult utility. But he gets a nice follow-up wall stun there. Like, he does a lot that game. And as noted, I really don't like the fact that he didn't go Garbage Fire. Seeing Red is a fine talent. I actually think Seeing Red is arguably maybe the best dueling talent at this tier. It's frequently the best split pushing talent, even though W7 can do a lot of damage to structures. Because the increased attack speed helps you just nuke down buildings a little bit faster, and then having the cooldowns of Staggering Blow and Hog Wild up more often can lead to like a lot of safety. And I do think it is a safety thing. Seeing Red is a very safe talent, because if you have a bad E, especially with the movement speed from Hogger's Joggers, you can kite. No, you choose where you pop out. I'll show you guys. So the arrow tells you where you're going to pop out. So I'm going to pop out top side here. See, I'm on the top. Bottom side here. Right side here. Top left. And that's how you do those plays, where you pick which side you're going to come out on and make sure you can get the walls done that we were talking about. So, yeah, seeing red is a very safe talent for having a bad E, but if you practice Hogger enough, you really are going to get far more benefit out of Garbage Fire if you're Hortipult. Garbage Fire is also the best camp taking talent, and since even offlane Hogger takes camps, like, because he does it so much faster than anyone else on the team that he should be the one doing camps. But this is offlane Blaze, 4-man Hogger. Sylvanas is not going to do camps. Sylvanas sucks at doing camps. It's really slow. So Hogger is going to be doing camps all game. Garbage Fire helps you do camps faster. It's clearly the better talent for this game. But there is seeing red is a very good insurance policy for bad spins, because you can kite with the movement speed from Hogger's Joggers. You'll have E up a little bit faster. You're more likely to be able to E out if you make a mistake. That's not a good reason to take a talent for competitive, though. You should just practice until you can do it right, in my opinion. But I know that is literally a minority opinion. Most people are like, but it's hard. What about seeing red with the quest on 4 for big AA? Actually, that has a pretty high ladder win rate. And someone sent me a replay asking if they thought it was awful, and it was Dragonshire, and it essentially allowed them to win a duel consistently versus a Yrel who kept fighting them on point. I don't know if it was correct for the Yrel to be fighting them on point, but given how the game actually went, it ended up being okay. Right? I don't think that will ever be good against good players, but it worked, so. It has a high ladder win rate because Uki is grinding again. Maybe. We also get to see a really good no control here. It is a decent combo for Immortal Race. But again, you have to be getting the wall stuns, right? Are you really stacking it that fast? That's my question. Are you really stacking it that fast consistently against people who are like, I know you can wall stun me. I'm not going to stand near a wall. Because I'm gonna be honest, guys. A lot of the wall stuns I get, like when I'm just playing Hogger, I should not be getting, but people just stand near walls, so it's like, thank you. So you don't always no control for damage. Sometimes you no control just for chase, right? But if you're gonna no control for damage, you want to no control onto a clump, which this 75% meets that requirement, and you want to no control at high rage. So this is medium rage. This is not exactly high rage, right? It's not terrible. Dequaza is split, but the rest of the team is all retreating through a choke, which they're clumping into. That no control does 6.7k damage. A good damage no control, because sometimes no control is just used for chase. It's not about doing damage. A good damage no control will generally do something like 5k. That one did 6.7k. If he had been at full rage, it would have done over 10. And if Dahaka hadn't been there to split the no control, it probably would have done over 14k damage and single-handedly won the game. So it was an okay no control, but there's one thing he could have fixed that would have made it better, and one thing that the enemy team could have done to make it less, like if Dequaza had moved further down, or if his team had forced Dahaka further down so Dahaka couldn't come with part of the bounce, that no control would have done substantially more. But it was an okay no control. Do you agree with Justin that a good Hogger should hold E for defense? It depends on the context. Like, sometimes you need to E in, especially if you're playing Shockwave. A really common play that happens is your tank will step up for vision. You'll E in, you'll line up an E to get pummel value, and then you'll Shockwave off of the slow, which is an insanely good play to make if your team's on the same page and actually understands what you're trying to do. And obviously you're not holding E for defense when you're doing stuff like that. When you're Hortipult, you can very much hold E for defense because you use Hortipult to go in. Ideally, you get a wall stun, and then you E out. Right? So that's very, very good. Sometimes you're doing using E in really specific ways for specific types of spins. Like on Infernal Shrines, when you're doing the infinite spin, obviously you're not holding E for defense there. Right? So it just depends. But as a general rule, I would say it is better to hold E for defense in lane than it is to use it for clear. The only time you should use E in lane is if you see the enemy team on the map and you're totally fine. Or you're last hitting the wave with E, so you soak it and then you're just out. Like the wave, the E clears the wave and it bounces you to safety, so you're totally fine. But yeah, most people would be much better served to play E defensively instead of offensively, especially if you're not on comms with your team. I see Sylv perfect a lot. Is she that good now? On game 4, Sylv seemed like a weird first pick on Cursed. Was that correct? The offensive is a little risky. If you hit a bad angle, you're probably dead. That is absolutely true. It takes a lot of practice before you should have any confidence to E offensively. So at the end of HGC, Sylv was reworked after HGC 2018 ended, but people were still scrimming. And this version of Sylv was something that I actually saw in HGC scrims, and it's something we went into when I was coaching Scythe Esports. We went into a lot of work to sort of do a deep dive on Syl and figure out when she was going to be good. And we actually pretty much universally came to the conclusion that Syl would be one of the most meta DPS in HGC 2019. And then HGC didn't happen. And she's been buffed since then. So I think it's a weird early pick on Curse specifically. I don't love Sylvanas on Curse because she doesn't really offer any of the main tools that I really value on Curse Hollow. But it's not unusual for Sylvanas. I don't think it's weird for Sylvanas to be a high priority ranged pick by any stretch of the imagination. Sylvanas does a lot of things on the map. She does a lot of things in fights. She has very strong heroics. So Syl is arguably one of the single strongest DPS in the game right now. Maybe the strongest, if you factor in versatility. If you can't E offensive, I think Hogger is kind of sucky. You just got to get better, Galney. Storm versus CM. Game 2. Ana is a rare sight these days, and this game felt like a pretty good example of why she's fallen out of the meta. Where do you think Ana's power stands in the current game balance? Was this game a good example of her power/pitfalls? Well, you can't play Ana into Medivh. Like, Ana was 4-5, Medivh was last picked. So the funny thing is, when CCL started and in-houses were happening, people were first picking Ana in those in-houses for like a day, and then Justing and Priz started farming Anas, and Lutana, like all the returning HCC players just started farming Anas. And then Ana stopped being first pickable, and it was amazing. And I can't believe that Ana was that meta, because Ana, regardless of how strong her base kit is, will just get farmed by things like Zeratul, by things like Medivh comps, by things like Genji. But those heroes weren't being played for some reason, and then suddenly they were meta again, and suddenly Ana was not. So I think Ana is fine-ish. She's a really good counter to things like Brightwing, things like Rhaegar. Obviously, Nano is a very strong heroic. Even Eye of Horus is not actually that bad a heroic, even though it's not generally what we see in competitive, because generally when you draft Ana, you draft her with a nano target. But if you happen to think, oh, Ana's good here, but you don't have a nano target, it's fine to go Horus. But yeah, like, you cannot just pick Ana if the enemy team can pick something that can get to her. So either their entire damage structure is showing, right? So like if this had been Cassia Tychus, I don't know, Cassia something, right? A damage structure that like physically it cannot get to Ana, then they could pick Ana here. But with that one flex pick, it's impossible. So Ana may only be draftable into drafts where the enemy drafter made a mistake, or if you're second pick and you actually last pick Ana. I think that at a very high level of drafting, that may be where she's at, with maybe the exception of double support, because double support comps fundamentally break the rules for how safe Ana is, but a lot of teams aren't willing to play double support. Even Mouth is safer than Ana. Ana plus Uther seems pretty safe. Ana plus Uther has been running CCL, and it was pretty safe. How much value did Perfect Storm get this game? Would it have been better to pick another talent? Oh, this is back to the Curse game. I don't know why I had these questions out of order. This is Stats of the Storm. It is a freely available tool that you can just load replays into. So Perfect Storm did, drumroll, nothing this game. I'll give you guys the exact stats, because I know everyone loves the stats. So Perfect Storm did 2,739 bonus damage. That means that he hit that number of storms. It actually got up to 166 bonus damage per Q. However, every single kill that happened, the overkill was more, except for one late game kill, which I'm pretty sure would have happened anyway because Sylvanas had a Q running and the Q got like one tick on it and it would have given, would have ticked 4 more times. There was no healing. The enemy hero had no mobility. So I'm pretty sure it would have killed them anyway. But it actually did a lot more damage than I expected it to. 2,739 damage is a lot. And 166 bonus damage also is more than I expected. However, you got to think about this. You're at a level where like Collision Course at level 20 is doing like 600 damage, right? So 166 bonus damage at level 20 when something like Collision Course, which is considered a high damage ability, is doing 600. You make that comparison, you're like, that's, I don't know about that one. So I don't think Perfect Storm did anything this game, except I think it maybe secured 1 kill in the late game. Is that good? I mean, yeah, if you take Perfect Storm and it secures a single kill in the late game, arguably that can be worth it. The main reason the Perfect Storm used to be taken was because of the synergy it had with Sledgehammer, which allowed you to do stuff like a Mortal Race. But this wasn't Sledgehammer, so I don't really know. OA in comparison did 4k damage, not that much more than Murky. OA also slows. You gotta factor in the fact that there's utility there. So this is 4,276 damage to non-heroes, or 2 heroes, and 3.1k to heroes from Holy Fury. Holy Fury mathematically should literally always be the lowest damage talent from Johanna, just like straight up. And this was we'll try to do an apples to apples comparison. This was a 16 minute 13-second game. You think Lauber is going for my recommended Murray build, but chicken out? Maybe. Again, I'm going to try to make an apples to apples comparison for you guys. So this is a Johanna in a slightly longer game. To be fair, it's a 2-minute longer game. And Blessed. It is Blessed Hammer, right? So yeah, Blessed Hammer in a 2-minute longer game did 8.2k damage to heroes and 22,000 damage to non-heroes. The game is only 2 minutes longer. No one can tell me that it did 4k damage. All right, here, let me scroll it up because the cam might be blocking it. There you go. 8,259 damage to heroes, 22,811 damage to non-heroes. You should literally never pick Holy Fury. It is mathematically a trap talent, and it's been picked, I think, 6 total times in CCL, and every time it's done literally thousands of damage less than either Roar or Blessed Hammers would have done. It's actually that one-sided. Why did Chili Mountain fight down people so often in this game? So this was the garden game, right? Here's where it gets really useful to talk about what a fight is. So, I mean, this is a 4v4, right? Falstad Lunara bottom. Scylla's clearing midwave. This is 4v3. This is not a fight. It is the answer. This is not a fight. They're just trying to stall and then run away. You can make an argument that trying to stall with a Diablo is very, very risky because Diablo has no mobility. And you can make the argument that even having a wave here would have helped Diablo, but because the wave was shoved up, it's impossible for Diablo to have something to queue to get out of here. Hammers will also do that, for the record. You don't need to pick Holy Fury to clear creep. So they're not fighting down people. They're just stalling the seed. Now, is there a risk to doing stalls like this and the enemy team goes on you and it's 5v4, which you're pretty much guaranteed to lose? Yeah, but if you want to take absolutely no risks, you basically have to stand and spawn. But Chili Mountain is not trying to fight here. Chili Mountain is trying to get a macro advantage on the map and to stall out the game for as long as possible because they have better 20s, is essentially what it comes down to, right? They have the mind control 20. They'll be able to fish for kills consistently. They're just trying to make the game as slow as possible. So people are seeing this and they're like, why are they fighting down numbers? Well, they're not fighting down numbers. Even this, Doc is burrowing in here, but even this is not a fight. This is a pick. They want to get this kill and then just dip. And they use bunker. They really should have just left after the kill. But they use bunker to guarantee that no counter swing happens. They, run at the Muradin, who's split from the team. As soon as they decide that they won't get the Muradin kill, they turn around. Any second now. Okay, hello. They push the mid fort down. That was not a fight. Right? Even though both teams were eventually there as 5, that was a rotational pick where, oh, this person's out of position, we have these tools, we're gonna get the kill. This thing top was just a stall while Falstad got macro value. They're just trying to scale to 20. They have a numbers advantage here, so they're pushing the fort. As soon as they don't have the numbers advantage, they back up. Right? Chili Mountain doesn't take any fights down numbers this game at all. But they do skirmish with the enemy team down numbers, but they're not trying to fight. That's not the point. That's not what they're trying to do. A fight is something where everyone, both teams are there in even numbers, and both teams are trying to kill the other team, usually over something. But just because you're engaging the enemy team or interacting with the enemy team doesn't mean you're fighting. And it's a really important distinction. During HEC, there were actually many, even during Season 1 of CCL, right? Simplicity would do a lot of things where they would be skirmishing with the enemy team, while Cure as AA Zeratul was split pushing and trying to end the game. And then if anyone went back to deal, so they were skirmishing 4v5, and then if someone went back to stop Zera would come to the fight, and then it would be a 5v4 in the other direction. It's really important to distinguish between this is a fight versus we're just stalling versus we're trying to slow them down, like on getting the objective, versus we're scaling. Just because the enemy team, just because multiple people from both teams are there doesn't make it a fight. Not the goal. Is AA Falstad the right pick? Yes. AA Falstad was absolutely the best pick here. 100%. It's really good into their front line. They don't really have anything to counterplay it except for Muradin's attack speed slow, which you're not really worried about getting hit by as Falstad, because if he jumps on you, you can generally just E away before he Ws, so you're not going to get that happening to you. AA Falstad is by far and away the best split pushing version of Falstad. You're going to get stacks doing what you should be doing, and also you just absolutely melt buildings with the active, which we also saw this game if you go watch the replay. One of the reasons that all the walls were dead by the time the enemy team rotated was because of Falstad just hitting it with AA build. If your goal is to scale and macro, you should probably always be AA Falstad, regardless of map. So it was absolutely the correct thing to do for this draft. It's usually the correct thing to do on Garden in general. Did we see Maka perform the stop hopping technique on Lunara? Have we seen any CCL Lunara utilize this tech? As far as I'm aware, most CCL Lunaras don't even know that stop hopping is a thing. And generally when they do know it's a thing, it's because I've talked to them about it. So if I haven't talked to a Lunara about it, I kind of assume they don't know about it. When is Q Falstad better? Q Falstad is generally better if your other damage dealer is also a mage. Like Oxygen ran Chromie Falstad last season on Alterac, and Chromie Falstad, the Armor Shred, was very, very helpful. Also, every time you're in a Fiesta where the enemy team is just going to give you stacks, it's pretty good. So for those who don't know what stop hopping is, Lunara's movement speed bonus, her trait, so she gets 20% by a 20% movement speed bonus, which is not wrong. On average, if you just do this, you actually do end up with a 21% movement speed bonus. But the way it works, if you look at the movement speed on the indicator, is you actually go all the way up to like 175% movement speed. And then as you land, you go down to 50% movement speed. And it's just what makes the animation work really clear. However, you can hit hold or stop on the land and never go below 100% movement speed. And this is called stop hopping. And effectively, it gives you like a 10 to 15% movement speed increase on rotations. And this is generally the way you do it. You hold down the right mouse button to like move to where you're going. It is not. It is possible to stop hop so slowly that you move slower if you just keep interrupting the high movement speed. And it's just sort of a rhythm game. I think it's like every third of a second, you'll basically... If you hit it every third of a second, it basically works. It's not really practical to do it in fights, in my opinion. I don't think it'll ever get to a point where doing it in a fight is practical. But it does get you in a position where you will rotate faster. And because Lunara doesn't have a normal mount, rotating faster is obviously really valuable. It also does work with the level 20 Galloping Gait. It works with Hippity Hop. Hippity Hop, you don't have to change the rhythm at all. It's still 3 times per second. It's a little bit faster with Galloping Gait, but Galloping Gait plus Stop Hopping essentially puts you at over 200% movement speed, which is pretty good. It's pretty good as an escape tool. Obviously, the ult upgrades for Lunara are so insane that I don't know if that's technically even worth practicing. But that's Stop Hopping. As far as I know, no one has done it in CCL. If any CCL players start actually doing it in a game, let me know. I'll look at it and see how much value it actually got. Is Dino the only fall stat in CCL we've seen pick Epic Mount in any season? Do you think this talent is underpicked compared to Windle? I don't think he's the only person. I think there's like 1 or 2 other games in Season 2, I want to say, where someone else picked it. But generally, we do see Wind Tunnel. The 2 major benefits of Epic Mount are you can get to fights faster, and a few seconds is a huge difference in level 20 team fights. We already saw that today, right, where CPX was 3 seconds slow. Not even on a fight, just on doing a camp at level 20, and it caused everything to go wrong. So being able to get there faster, because it reduces the channeling time, is massive, right? Reducing the cooldown is useful, but not necessarily that insane. You generally won't be utilizing the cooldown reduction that much. The major exception for that is Dragonshire. Dragonshire is a map where you can play Ring Around the Rosie with the objective, and you'll actually use the reduced cooldown. That was the thing even during HGC. But you increase the fly speed by 50%, but you also lose the landing reticule. So for those of you who don't know, when you're playing Falstad and you fly, the enemy team can see your landing location. So one of the reasons you see players on Falstad always fly out of vision or fly into a bush or something is because the enemy team gets to see where you're going to land. So there's a landing reticule. That they can see that. The enemy team can see that. If you take Epic Mount at level 20, the landing reticule goes away and they can't see that you're going to land anymore. That plus the speed.
Choose a talent. Choose a talent. Choose a talent.
Right, just the fact that it's faster means that you're much more likely to be able to get very aggressive gust flanks. And even though it's not wind tunnel level, where they're going to be constantly pushing into a wall, it's much easier to find, oh, this is a perfect gust, go for it, hit it, you're good. So I don't think it's like always one or always the other. I definitely think there are comps and maps where it's going to be good. I don't think Dino always goes Epic Mount either. I definitely remember seeing Dino take Wind Tunnel. But sometimes Epic Mount is going to be better. I think you can make a strong argument that in this comp specifically, like Garden is a map where there's a lot of walls, so you could get Wind Tunnel value. But with the way they're playing fights, and especially when they're trying to just isolate someone for 7-sided, I think that Epic Mount is actually quite a bit better this game. How good is Gen G compared to CCL level? Much better. Gen G was the best team in the world by like a good margin. I think early CCL seasons were probably close to late 2016 competitive HOTS, that level of play. I think current CCL is maybe mid 2017, maybe late 2017. Yeah. Lauber is getting tilted from playing with Storm. His recent tweets below show it. I think this is debatable, but someone asked, so well. I think current level of Oxygen could probably beat Genji like 4-2 in a best of 7. No chance. And I don't think anyone on the team would agree either. And some of the people on the team played against Genji. June watched a few late HGC games between Tempo Storm and various teams, and holy, the play level's mind-boggling high from both sides. Yeah, it's not. We're not there yet. I think we can actually get there, to be fair. When is the AA false talent on 20 false start of 20 viable? When you have already won the game and you are ending on core. That is when you should pick it. It's you were 19 to 18, you got a penta, you hit 20 as a result of killing people, and you're going core and ending the game. You should take the AA false start 20. In that sense, that talent should have 100% win rate, because that's the only time you should ever take it, and the game's already open. CCL lane slipping away, maybe time to call it. Get me out. This, by the way, is in the context of a game that happened not this weekend, but last weekend, where he was very frustrated with how effective Hammer ended up being into, despite the Li Ming pick, because Lauber truly did not believe that Li Ming was the best option there. He wanted to pick Greymane and Rat. He wanted to just avoid the Hammer all game and hit buildings with a Greymane. No, he's not worried that lane will be against. He's saying that his team, he doesn't think this roster can get to top 4, which, even if you think that, I don't really want to see people doing this publicly. Lauber is clearly getting tilted from playing with this team. He really wanted to play with Swamp, so I don't know if it's Swamp that's tilting him or if it's some other player. I'm not going to go ask him. That's just strange, in my opinion, especially because, you know, I always have to be a little bit careful. I try to be as diplomatic about this as possible, but I am the coach for a team in CCL. I don't really want to go asking, hey, what's wrong with your team? Because even though for the context of the show, it's totally fine for me to be doing that, in the context of the coach, it's really not. He was really tilted at Swamp. Maybe it's Swamp that he's still doing. I don't know. But he's obviously very unhappy with how the team is performing. So... But this isn't acceptable regardless of that, right? I don't want to see tweets like this happening. In some ways, maybe it's just a way for him to vent, and hopefully he goes back to the team and is like, okay, what next? Do you think Storm should trade him for Porky or any other free agent tank? I would say no. In addition to this, there was another question. Why aren't Storm playing with Nasmus? He brings so much to the table that I feel like they'd have a better shot if he was there. Nasmus is on vacation, which is why they're not playing with him. Apparently, he will be playing with the team as soon as he gets back from vacation. So we'll see if that changes Lauber's attitude about the goings on. CM seemed to put a heavy priority on the support bans, with the casters musing that they must be targeting June. Would you agree with that assessment, or do you think this is a bigger picture draft strategy? If it is a ban June strategy, do you think it's the best players on Storm to isolate? No, you can't ban June. June has just a depth of experience in playing too many different supports. I think, honestly, what it came down to was supports are, like, on Garden of Terror specifically, Rhaegar offers you macro. You don't want to get out macroed. You're going to go false dead. Easy. Lucio also offers you rotational priority because of the movement speed, right? This is just an acknowledgement that in a lot of ways, supports are the best counter to many strategies. Supports are literally, in some cases, the best counter to every strategy. If you draft the correct support against the right comp, you'll just win. Yeah. I think that that was a much higher level drafting strategy than just isolate June's hero pool, which you can't do. We saw Make roll swap on the tank to sub for Masquerade. How did he look to you? Much worse than Masquerade. Do you think it's a reasonable expectation for players at this level to perform relatively well in any all roles? No. Like, Rich was the best player of all time, right? I think some people think Reset was maybe a little bit better, but a lot of people argue that Rich is one of the best players of all time. If you've ever seen Rich play support, you'd be like, man, that guy is bronze. What is going on? Rich's Lucio was one of the most hilariously awful things I have ever seen. It was so bad. Yeah, so some players play a bunch of different roles. Kyocha played four roles competitively. The only one he didn't play was tank in a competitive game, but he actually did have one of the best materials of any player ever in, like, the history of HOTS, in my opinion. Probably top 5, maybe top 6, but it was up there. Nurok actually played every role competitively. Nasmus has played at least 3 roles competitively. And he's good at several others. So some players can role swap, and it's fine. And some players are really good at their role and can't. So it just depends on the level of practice and the level of interest and the level of experience. I don't think it's a reasonable expectation for every player to be able to roll swap. That's silly. Some people can, and some people can't, and that's fine. Just knowing one way or the other is good. Make performed acceptably on tank. Yeah, Nurak played tank in like 2015. Yeah, Sport Pilly played for a few different roles. Like, several people played different roles. So, if they can, great. If they can't, don't put them on a role they can't play. Or if you do put them on a role they can't play because you're forced to because of a sub situation, like, don't flame them for not being good at it, because they won't be good at it. This is the thing that happens. Discuss the way Granite Gaming changed the way they positioned across the game to defend themselves from Oxygen's game plan. Malfurion moving way back out of reach from Genji, Murden intercepting Dragon's Arrow. They did do that a little bit. We had to start playing a little bit better around Dragon Arrow, but honestly, the main problem, there was nothing they could do, honestly. What it came down to was the fact that we fought out of the jungle. That comp really wanted to fight in the jungle. We took a single bad fight under their keep at level 20, and the game ended. And I'm going to give you guys an idea of how very, very little you can make mistakes into players who have the level of experience that Granite does. So they're losing. They're 18-17. Their top keep is dead. All forts are alive, right? Poik is on this team. Wubby is on this team. Like, this is Offlane Phoenix with Medivh, by the way. Cool strat. And they just, win an insane fight, whatever. Get 2 kills, get a 3rd kill, get a 4th kill. Tracer isn't dead. They portal over the wall. Just all focus on the keep. That doesn't save as much time as you might think, because you can just kill the sidewall pretty quickly. But they portal over the wall. On average, it takes a comp about 25 seconds to kill a keep plus core, if you're 5 people alive. Some comps will do it a little bit faster. I mean, Greymane comps will do it a bit faster. Archon Li Ming will do it a little bit faster. Jaina will do it a little bit faster. Especially Ice Fury 1 Jaina will do it a little bit faster than other comps. But, like, on average, 25 seconds. So if you kill 5 people and there's 25 seconds on the clock and you can get to a keep within 10 seconds, the game's over. You will just end the game. Just know that number. So they have 30 seconds and they're already on keep. This game is over. And it's not like, oh, can we? Is it going to be? No, it's not close, guys. The game is over. Tracer's alive, so Tracer has to forcibly defend this. Portal dancing, by the way. Really insane thing you can do with Medivh whenever you're core racing is put a portal on either side. So even if someone's defending, they have to constantly walk around to target you, and you just keep portaling back and forth. They even put some damage into the Tracer. Arguably, it's wrong to do that. Arguably, everyone should have been on the core the whole time. Why did Garrosh not go through portal? Because he messed up. So yeah, you can just end the game. So you really can't ever make that mistake of being they die. It just doesn't work. You're gonna lose the game at that point. We notice how the first 10 levels of the game, Granite Gaming got more structural damage than Oxygen. Of course, this is a consequence of having Sylvanas, but it's also a consequence of having Hanzo W4 at level 4 instead of Q. So the game plan was for Hanzo to do camps from 4 onwards, and for Genji to make it impossible for Sylvanas to put that kind of pressure on. The game plan didn't work. is what it came down to. Because Joe Dahaka clear waves, Genji roams and interferes with their rotations, and then from 4 onwards, Hanzo Anduin do camps. It should have been fine. But Granite Gaming was very good about doing stuff like this, where they slowed our camp down just by doing pressure. This is Nick on the camp because we're not 4 yet. So Granite played pretty well in terms of just getting stuff out. And then at 4, we get W on Hanzo, but they get Incinerator Gauntlets on Blaze, which is unfair. Incinerator Gauntlets is actually one of the most busted talents in the game for doing camps. Blaze is actually the single best offlaner doing camps from 4 onwards, except for Hogger. Hogger's the only one who does it faster. So it's actually like, and Hogger frequently goes slower if people help him, whereas Blaze is just, Blaze just speeds the camp up even if things happen. But like here, Hanzo's bottom. Genji can't defend this push, right? So we need Joe here a little bit sooner, and we knew this camp was coming. We also, this camp, we did it earlier, so it's no longer available for the defense. It's really helpful sometimes to have the Siege be able to defend the Bruisers, depending on how you want to but it can be tricky to time it out correctly and actually make that work, because you want to get the camp done before the seed spawns. And yeah, the Granite Gaming is ratting. And they do a lot. Could the core call have been executed better? Honestly, not really. That was a pretty good core call. Like even so massive mistakes people frequently make. Actually, it could have been executed better. This is wrong. See these towers? These towers don't need to be killed. Syl can turn them off, and everyone can just walk by. So the amount of damage they pump into that tower is just... It's wrong. This is good, though. They figure it out. They don't kill the other tower. That goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where frequently you just kill the sidewall. Quack called to kill only bot tower. Quack is wrong. It should have been just keep. It probably wasn't Quack. Honestly, like Quack's team did a lot of these things. Notice too, Lunara is probably the highest core damage of any of these heroes. And Poik tries to stay as far away as possible. We're trying to kill Sylvanas and Lunara, by the way. We don't care about anyone else. We're trying to kill Sylvanas and Lunara because they're the core damage. And they just walk away from us. And see, we're running at them. We're trying so hard, but no, not gonna happen. And then everyone gets in the bunker. As soon as everyone gets in the bunker, it's Giga over. The armor is too insane. Other than not killing that tower, I don't think that could have really been executed better. The positioning was really good. The damage all focused on core. We threw CC at the people trying to interfere with the... They threw CC at the people trying to interfere with the kills. Bunker came back up. We used bunker as they spawned, or as the oxygen was spawning. It's about as good as it gets, other than the tower thing. Game 2, is Terran artillery too good? I feel like this is a question of, is Tychus... I think this question is Tychus Hammer good together? I think that's the question. Tychus Hammer is pretty good together. Hammer hits people, and if anyone tries to come in and mess around with the hammer, his big bro Tychus is like... Or her big bro Tychus, sorry, Hammer's a girl, is like, no, and just shoots them. It's fine. Hammer pairs well with a lot of heroes, though. It's not... Like, if you want to make a thematic comp... I guess Blaze is also there. Did we mess up and not draft a full... Maybe we should have drafted Morales and Artanis so we had a full StarCraft comp. We know already Tyrael slows down Johanna Talent's rotations with shields on minions, but is this aspect impactful when it can slow down Hammer's push into walls with the help of Chromie, of course? If so, what would make the Tyrael essential or a counter to the Hammer pushes early game? No Terran King character? I mean, the closest is Blaze, right? But Blaze main tank is... This aspect is very much impactful, by the way, because it does slow down the push into walls, but also shields are really good at dealing with chip damage and poke, so Tyrael's actually pretty good into Hammer. I don't think this is an insanely good Tyrael draft, though, because Tyrael's not really enabling anything. I think in order for Tyrael to be good, if you're not gonna... I think Tyrael's peak is enabling something with Swift Rat. If you're not enabling something with Swift Rat and you feel like you're forced to go auto build, it's pretty clunky. We don't have... I mean, we have a cleanse support, but it's not a hard cleanse. So there's an argument, and someone talked about it later. Grubby said he expected this to be Judgment because it doesn't feel like a sync game, and talks about how sync traditionally has been used in the past. Is this ability counter Nick and Oxygen change if Judgment is picked? We would change our play if Judgment had been picked. Judgment is definitely something that could have been picked here. We interrupted Sank multiple times just because Tyrael swords in and the enemy team runs. at you, you're like, oh yeah, he's gonna Sanct, and you knock him, you poly him, whatever. This was not a good Sanct game. Generally, it's really difficult to play Sanct offensively in competitive without a hard cleanse, and they have a mouth. So they had to play Sanct defensively, and you're playing AA Tyrael with a defensive Sanct. You're like, ugh. That's just not a feels good moment. Yeah. Tyrael mouth in general can be really good, though, if you have some sort of if you win the poke war and then you're allowed to Sanct defensively, because it provides a save for the mouth, but we win the poke war. So Tyrael has been played as a hammer counter in competitive with a hard cleanse, because you can sword onto the hammer, Sanct, and everyone comes to the Sanct and just focuses the hammer. But without a hard cleanse, it doesn't really work. Judgment may have been better this game. I don't know if it would have made a difference, but Judgment may have been better than Sanct this game. It's certainly likely to actually, go off, which would have been better than not going off. How do you counter hammer? Leeming and Chromie have already failed. How meta is hammer currently? It's not enough to know the counter exists. You have to know how to play it. So I'm not gonna give too many tips on this, because obviously Oxygen plays a fair amount of hammer. But currently, so far, the Leeming and Chromie picks that have been picked into hammer have not been talented or played correctly. And again, if anyone wants to know what the counters are, just pick hammer into Oxygen and give us a free win. And then you'll get to see what the counters are, because we'll pick them. From Chromie to counter hammer, did she need loop that game? There is almost no hard CC to engage, lock down the hammer. Malfruit can be strong and Dahaka can land a tongue, but neither can actually go on the hammer. Truthfully, if this had been loop, we may have just gone Falling Sword. But you really can't go loop into this draft because of bunker. No, you can't go loop into bunker. We will actually get in the bunker. And we also have the spell armor from Brightwing. It's not an option. Piggybacking on both previous points, if Loop Judgment are taken as mouse back into Twilight Dream to secure kills into a team that has a cleanse. No, you can't do that. Twilight Dream would do absolutely nothing this game. GG versus Auction Game 3. Why Mura over a noob? I mean, Hammer's not a hero you can just like first pick every game or anything, but Hammer is pretty decently strong at the moment. I would make the argument that Hammer was never weak, honestly. The only reason you didn't see Oxygen play Hammer in Season 2 and 3 is we didn't have a Hammer player. Oxygen played Hammer in Season 1 of CCL, and Priz played Hammer. Why Mura over a noob? I like Cascon's way of putting this. Why a noob over Mura? Hello? So we pick, we see Leoric, Stukov, Lunara. Let me pick Muradin instead of a noob. The Muradin, honestly, is just better here. Like a Nubarak, they could still, I don't know if they'd do it, but they could still go double support. A Nubarak is really bad into double support. Just ask Justing. Justing thinks a Nubarak is literally unplayable in double support. I'm not sure if the matchup's that bad, but they could do it, right? They could theoretically do some sort of double support style comp. We don't want to do that. And Muradin is just unkillable to this damage structure, whereas a Nubarak, if he gets caught in a silence puddle, will die pretty easily. Just Mura was a little bit safer. What's Poik's W accuracy? How does this compare to a random Poikonza game from the end of 2018? Why do you guys ask these questions? Okay, let's go. So I had Spazzo start working on a feature that will make W accuracy a little bit easier to track. Unfortunately, Tomb is the one map that frequently desyncs using Spazzo's replay tool. So,
Thank you.
scatters before you end up stacked are really irrelevant, by the way. The latest you ever want to be stacked is by level 16, but I prefer when players are stacked between 8 or 9 minutes at the latest. Is Granite scaling? This comp or the team in general? 16 out of 20. We're almost there. Gets a stack there. 18. He stalls at 18 for a little bit because of rotations. So we finished around 8 minutes. This is the, you know, it's the low end of the minimum. So nothing too insane there. The second question, by the way, that we'll also be looking at was Poik griefing his dragon arrows this game. His dragon arrows were actually pretty good. We'll talk about why that is as they happen. There's a wave. Yrel is going to jump on the wave. I'm going to arrow in anticipation of Yrel jumping on the wave. I am out of vision. No one will know. Instant R by Copen. That R is so important because of the silence. Honestly, this play was not Poik's fault. It was Azurite's fault. Azurite needed to move up just like a little bit sooner and get that silence off so that Copen couldn't hit the R. But instant R. Wait, did he W during that? I think he did. And if so, did that W hit? Got sidetracked. Thinking about arrows, needed to be thinking about Ws. Are we going to lose textures? Oh, please let me lose textures. Poik was complaining that he had freeze lags during the game. Oh, we lost textures! OP. Nah, I'm not going to rewind again to see if that W hit or not. I'm pretty sure that W didn't hit. Or he didn't W at all, because it would still be on cooldown if he'd actually thrown it. I don't think he W'd at all. For anyone who's never spent a ton of time in HOTS rewinding replays, this is what happens when you rewind replays and some of the textures unload. Everything's still there, you just can't see it. That's a poking scatter, not a teamfight scatter. I don't have to count the fact that I missed. Yeah, see, Wubby is a thing. That's a scouting scatter. Maybe a poking scatter? That's not a teamfight scatter, though. So it doesn't really matter. I think arguably we have one missed teamfight scatter so far. Not too insane. New hero? Yes, the texture placeholder hero. Alright, Breeze is here. So now everything from this point, as long as Breeze is in range of the target or has slid the target, this will be a teamfight scatter. There's just too much crap in the way, though. I think there's a realistic chance that Poik had one actual teamfight scatter this game and it missed. So he'd have a 0% accuracy for the game, but like... Yay, we can fast forward because he's dead. So it's so nice when Hanzos die when I'm asked this question, like a lot, so that I can just fast forward. So again, this arrow... Is this arrow good? I think this is the first time Oxygen sees this arrow happening. Maybe this minion was in range? I think this minion might have been in range, actually. But we get the arrow on the retreat. It hits one person. This is... So they're down, right? They're 3 levels down. They're desperate. You throw arrows like this, where it's just like, hopefully it hits them on the retreat and we can get something when they're absolutely desperate. Ideally, that minion would not have been alive. But it's not a bad arrow, right? It's just that they're so far down that they need to do things. And I think literally from this point onward, they don't get an actual team fight. So it's like, if you don't get a team fight, you can't have team fight scatters. That's the way it works. Tiger's pick really working out there. So even that, the tank's already dead. I don't know if I can count that as a team. That, like, sure, that's a team fight scatter. I think that missed then. It only hit 3 arrows out of 7. This, by the way, might seem like an insane arrow, and doing it from Envision was wrong. But the thought process here is, if we get a boss, if we get an arrow on the boss stun, maybe Wubby can res as Leoric and steal it. I mean, the problem is that Leoric is not an engage tank that works for Hanzo, right? So the only engage they have is ETC, and ETC died at the start of that fight. So it's really hard for me to be like, yeah, those scatters should have been hitting reliably in the team fight because they have no engage left up. But even then, his accuracy was like not good, right? I think it legitimately may have been 0% this game. I mean, would you guaranteed die? Honestly, I think this game had to be stage dive, and he had to stage dive to dodge the loop. But yeah, Poik's accuracy this game was 0%. He was on a ping, he was lagging, and he's rusty. But I legitimately think I wouldn't count any of those as hits. So even if I counted them as team fight scatters, which I think is debatable, they didn't hit. So 0%. And he lost. So the scale works. His worst game in HGC, I think he had 60% accuracy on his team fight scatters. His worst game. His average was 80%. But he was also playing 40 hours a week. Right? Which makes a pretty massive difference. He did grief a couple of his arrows, but again, desperation. I think if he had a 90% hit rate, he would still lose this game. Maybe. I mean, we'll never know. Neil Peasants, I wouldn't think the Merc monster damage is useful as the range, the extra slow at 4. Being able to de-push lanes by yourself can really matter as Leoric. So like on Dragonshire, if I'm top lane Leoric, I will very strongly consider going Neil Peasants. So if the enemy team caps bruisers, no one has to rotate up to help me. I can deal with bruisers by myself, unless the enemy team is pushing with it. Also, it helps you do the camp faster. So Leoric becomes one of the, same thing with Blaze with Incinerator Gauntlets. Level 4 is suddenly you can actually do bruisers for your team, which can matter. Also, the monster damage is really relevant on Tomb of the Spider Queen because it helps you de-push Webweaver turn-ins by yourself much more easily. Obviously, the other talents are always going to be better in fights because they actually do something in fights, but being able to pick a talent that will sometimes give you rotational prio is pretty big. Because you can, like, let's say you're the Leoric bottom and the enemy Webweavers are turned in, you can clear that Webweaver and then come to mid. And it's like 8 to 10 seconds faster than it would be otherwise, so your team has a much more likely chance of you get a good 5v5 team fight. Now, if you get a 5v5 team fight, maybe Paralyzing Rage is better in that fight, but is Paralyzing Rage going to help you get that fight? Never. It doesn't work that way. I'm a little disappointed I didn't see Wubby go fealty, by the way. A little disappointed. Wubby is the person who went fealty on Tomb even before it was buffed in HGC. Would they not have the tools to interrupt stage dive if he tried to remove loop with it? So he could have gone Crowd Surfer at 4, slid every time he was looped, and then, especially if he slid over a wall, that would create enough space that he should be able to stage dive out. Why? E13. I think Wubby wanted to go a traditional build, and they were so far behind because this is core defense, right? They hit 16 on the. He rezzed on boss, And E16 is only going to help you in team fights. It's not. This whole game ended up very scuffed for them. Was picking Stukov into Chromie and misplay due to not understanding the limitations of abolished magic or intentionally throwing? I think that they thought they would be fine. As long as you're being proactive with Stukov, things like Chromie don't really matter that much. But you have to be in a position where you're allowed to be proactive, and they just got massively out macroed in the early game, so none of that mattered. You have to consider the duration of the game. It's not enough to be like, at 20, this will totally work. No. What if Scary thought you don't hit 20? Also, Azerite as a support sub as a sub who doesn't necessarily play support, didn't really necessarily have, he might not have even had a cleanse option, which is why subs and role swaps can be very difficult to deal with. Because even if someone can be like, oh yeah, I can play support, and they play 2 supports, and neither of them is a cleanse support, or they play 3 supports and only one of them is a cleanse support and it's banned, like, you have problems. Feels like a relatively early Leoric pick in this draft. Tychus and Anduin both still available and subsequently picked. Do you think this is a result of Wubby's current hero pool? Any reason not to pick Dahaka here instead? No, you can't pick Leoric that early in competitive HOTS. That's just a draft mistake. Leoric is interesting, and I think that it's one of the few heroes that people have learned to punish better since HGC. So they might not have had that context. What happened to D-Blade needs D-Shield to work? Is Purge plus Abolish plus double Ancestral enough? So it's not, it's not only a question of does it work, it's does the enemy team punish it? Right? So what are the punishes here for Dragonblade? Like, seriously, what are the punishes? Silpheroic, a Noob Heroic. That's it. Everything else in this comp does, no other buttons in this comp punish Dragonblade at all. Like, actually none of the buttons. So you wait out Cocoon, and then you Dragonblade and kill their whole team. And you use Rhaegar Cleanse plus Ancestral to deal with the Silpheroic if it hits you, which it might not. Some teams just don't punish. Actually, Sound Barrier does punish. That's fair. Dragonblade is actually heavily countered by Sound Barrier. And as soon as Dragonblade was picked, you can make an argument that Azerite should have gone Sound Barrier to sort of deal with this. But then without High Five, Lucio is heavily countered by Blessed Shield Johanna. So it's like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Please rate this Lucio build. Accelerando, everyone goes that. Subwoofer, it's fine. This is a ward. Damage Lucios don't play this, but Damage Lucios are Lucios that have a lot of time on the hero, so they can play very aggressively. Slip, up to 11? I don't understand why this is ever picked, to be honest. Mostly it's the 16 that I would find questionable. Some Cask on it, or some Lucio players in chat will probably correctly. You can't go over Salmon and Genji? What if you just swapped? I've been told you can just swap whenever he deflects it. So yeah, the reason I use Divine Shield as an example to enable Dragonblade is Divine Shield will always enable Dragonblade into basically anything but time stops. Right? Do people ever play smooth moves? If you ask every competitive Lucio player, they will tell you that the hero feels awful to play without El Accelerando because you cannot go too far away from walls. Accelerando allows you to go further away from walls. I think smooth moves would be pickable if you convinced your team to always play near the wall. And I think in that context, it may even be better. But you're putting your team near a wall for the entire game for that to be realistic. Accelerando definitely enables all of the stuff we see Lucios doing competitive with aggressively denying rotations and stuff. So it's a completely different playstyle. Literally, it's a completely different hero to Nako Accelerando. So you have this question. You have two questions. One is it worth the practice time to play a completely separate hero, essentially adding another hero to your pool? And is that good enough? Is that even better? What's the Lucio Nubrin? I mean, you can't do pairs like that. The pair win rate of heroes in CCL, the sample size is way too low to be relevant. Like, the talent rates of individual heroes are sometimes barely relevant. Why Chen here? I think Chen was honestly to split the fights. Right? Because Cleanse is Rhaegar's Cleanse is too short of a duration to be a particularly good counter to Keg. So it's literally just you Keg in and knock everyone away. This is something people tried to do in the past, into Bunker especially, but it was never consistent. It's also something that's really good into Rhaegar, because Rhaegar has a relatively short range cleanse. So even if Rhaegar is trying to stay in range to cleanse someone else, if you can Keg the Rhaegar in, you'll be in good shape. Granny Gaming bought Stuka for Tomb Game. Was choking their limited options due to any server ever part of the draft plan? No, it wasn't part of the plan. We had no idea if they owned heroes or not. We assumed that they at least owned their pools, and it didn't occur to me, at least. Maybe it occurred to the team and no one said it out loud, that the role swap might be a problem for Azerite not owning heroes. But that didn't occur to us. What's the biggest difference you saw in Granite's play when playing with Quack? Rotations. All of the rotations with Quacknix were so clean. What breezes Muradin win rate in CCL? It's 100%. Played one game. Is it higher than HCC? Yes. His win rate in HCC was 48%. How does that compare to other CCL players' Muradin win rate? That's actually I mean, this season it's not going to be like an insane amount, right? There's only been 41 games total. Muradin's been played in 27 of them. Lauber's played Muradin 7 times, 42% win rate. Caesar Salad, also 7 games. Caesar Salad a better Muradin than Lauber? Is that possible? No, it's probably team's fault. Haven, 5 games. Benny, 3 games. And there's Breeze, 100%. Not enough of a sample size quite so far. Sometimes you just gotta wait. You gotta wait for the numbers to come in, guys. You gotta wait for the numbers to come in. Washed or not, Chapter 2. How'd Granite look this weekend with Quack playing? Do you think they're coming into their potential? No. Some of these players were literally the best in the world at their roles. And they're not even the best in their role in CCL right now. They did look better with Quack playing, because their rotations were substantially better. Yeah, they're not there. I'm curious. So here's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering, is Granite Gaming gonna phone it in the entire season and then like have a boot camp right before the stepladder playoffs and like just do nothing but scrim and play HOTS for like a straight 2 weeks and then roll through the stepladder playoffs and get to the LAN? Is that the plan? Oxygen talked about doing something very similar to this season 2, right? Or are they just here if they get to the they'll play their best. If they get to the LAN, they get to the LAN. It's whatever. Wildheart versus 30k game 1. They don't want to practice that much like overall, but are they willing to grind for like a 2-week period or something, or even a 1-week period? Do they think that's enough? Because it's not the worst idea. I mean, Sim in season 1 did something very similar, right? Sim ended up winning CCL season 1, but they were 6th in the overall standings. But they played a lot leading up to stepladder playoffs and then playoffs to sort of get themselves up to snuff. Are we gonna? If we'd never seen it before, I'd be like, it's unlikely. But we've seen it before. Maybe that's the plan. I think Arrow would have been better than MC here into so many cleanses. How many? I mean, they have one. I mean, Arrow would obviously have been better into this comp, right? Because you're Rhaegar has a short range cleanse. Like this is triple melee. You're very likely to get clumps. I honestly don't really understand why this was mind control. Mind control is something you play for picks, but we didn't see Wildheart play for picks. They pretty much played for full-on team fights. Oxygen made a similar error in Wildheart against our series, where we went mind control when it should have been Arrow, I think. Is Tracer legitimately too hard for most CCL DPS players to avoid throwing the game trolling build with? I don't know. My perspective is obviously biased as a longtime Tracer main, but it seems like a noticeable pattern. So we're actually gonna we'll go a little bit deeper for this, right? Well, let me turn this off real quick so I don't accidentally show scrim win rates or anything in case Sassastorm decides to bug out on me and show too much data. I don't want you guys to know about the super secret Tracer picks. So Tracer's win rate in CCL overall, all seasons, is 62%. 50 games. Ruto played 1 game, I believe is a sub. Unaverted, 7-1. Dino, like 14-1, 13-2. Mason Blaze, Lutano, CPX, Gottfeld, Nick. Noah. Cure. So the only really stable Tracer players in CCL are, in my opinion, Mason, Blaze, Dino, and Unaverted. Everyone else is just not good enough at the hero to be picking it in competitive. Either because mechanically they're not good enough at it, or they don't understand how to play all the matchups. And they don't understand, sometimes some talents are situational. They also just don't play enough for attrition. So one of the distinguishing factors of Dino's play is actually Dino always has the highest self-healing per game on average of any Tracer player in CCL. So Dino does the thing you're supposed to be doing in Tracer, which is always be active on the hero, always be losing some health, and then always be gaining some health. And if you lose too much health, you don't necessarily back. You go like auto attack a camp or a wave or something. CCL wasn't an AU, you'd see the best Tracer players. I mean, Dino is EU. I'm literally like listing the things the best Tracer player does in CCL, and he's an EU player, and I don't see what difference that makes. Tracer's actually one of the easier heroes to play on ping because of the fact that you don't have to stutter step as far as range carries go. People just fundamentally don't understand the hero. Now, is that a practice issue? If they had more games on Tracer, would they have a better perspective of how you have to be playing Tracer in competitive to get value out of her? Maybe. I don't know. So far, I haven't really, like, even Dino. Like, he'll go Sticky Bomb when it's appropriate, which is really good. He'll go Composition B to aid the Sticky Bomb when it's appropriate. Really good. Sometimes we still see Bullet Spray from people in games where you absolutely shouldn't be Bullet Spray. Right? I don't know if Tracer's hard. I think people just have a very wrong idea of how Tracer needs to be played in competitive. And until you fix that, it's not going to matter if they get better at Tracer. Because their drafts will be wrong, or where they are on the map will be wrong. Like, Wild Harvest Game 1, potentially the whole series. How much do you think the pauses affected the games and players' mentals? This is actually something that varies a lot. Because, of course, Liam was lagging the entire time. Some players get super tilted at pauses. Like, literally, there was an HCC game where a team that was winning just straight up lost because they got so tilted after a pause. They were just infuriated by the pause's existence. And I'm not kidding. Like, they were so pissed off. Some people are like, whatever, I'm gonna get some water. They just come back. And it's like, okay, what were we doing? Okay, this is what we're doing. We go back in the game and it's fine. So it just depends. Like, I don't really think that anyone on either team is the type... Because here's the thing is, both teams, everyone on 30k has had experience with someone lagging. And just having to pause the game, and like during scrims and stuff. And it sucks, but it's like, you just get back into it. And I really don't think anyone on Wildheart is the kind of player to get tilted at a pause. If anyone from Wildheart wants to chime in and say if you guys got tilted or not, then... feel free, but I don't think it really affected anyone's mental. But it can affect teams' mental. It just depends on the team. Is Zergling canceling his Hog Wilds too early? This is an interesting question to me. There were definitely times where, theoretically, he could have continued to get value if he had continued the E. But he didn't know that for certain, right? A lot of the Hog Wilds were things that were not... Wildheart was super decent about it, to be honest. They even gave us their timer. Yeah, see, I don't think anyone was tilted. Oh, there's a tweet. Wait. Let's look at the tweet. Choosing me shout out to Wild Esports gave us their pause timer when we were having issues getting Liam back in, and we were very understanding with all our DCs and pauses. Yeah, everyone was class act, by the way, by Wildheart overall. So not really an issue. Where's the fight? It's at the bottom turn. Not turn, but the bottom siege camp. Actually, an insane spin. We're back to the screen. You guys didn't miss anything because I was just looking for the fight. So this is the spin. We get a wall stun here from the Hogger into the Shockwave, or Shockwave into the wall stun, excuse me. And this is the spin, and this spin secures the entire fight, right? So it gets onto the healer, so we get the pummel there. It actually clips Cure, so Cure is now pummeled, so slowed, right? Repummels him. Insane pummel value. So he cancels the spin there. I'm going to tell you guys right now, I know where that spin would have gone, because that's a known spin. That is a spin that you can use to scout the camp on Dragonshire, and I know exactly where it would have come back to. And I have a clip of it to prove it. Let me go through my Hogred database of spins real quick. So if you come into this camp at any angle, almost any angle, and you hit this wall right here, you bounce back out and recover this entire area. So he cancels the spin here. This would have bounced back up and repummeled everyone. It would have been better to repummel everyone, and then do exactly what he did, which is throw the D to here, but then stun people into it. I think his team can catch up if he repummels everyone. But again, if you're not really certain about where the spin is going to go, sometimes you feel like, oh, I've been spinning for a long time. I don't know if I should let this keep going. But that particular spin was canceled a little too early, in my opinion. Has anyone told Cattle that Heaven's Fury got nerfed? He seems to still strongly prioritize Falling Sword. Do you think Blessed Shield would have been more effective this game? I mean, you have the secondary engages, right? So in this game in particular, you have Condemn into Subdue with Slowing Sands as follow-up. That's fine. No reason not to go Subdue if you're Falling Sword. But you also have the Mind Control for the pick potential. So Blessed Shield maybe would have been better this game. But having the Falling Sword to cleanse the Pummel Slow and to cleanse Lunara Slow and to counter-engage all of the noob stuns, it's actually pretty good. I do think that the way Cattle is using it, where he's picking Falling Sword in comps where he has an alternate engage, and he's playing very defensively, cleansing his team, is how you should be playing Falling Sword. The 20 is just whatever. The 20 is good. It's not necessarily a must pick, even. Like, I think you could go legitimately make an argument. There are games where you could go Falling Sword and not even pick the 20. So I think it was fine. Would Blessed Shield have been better? Blessed Shield may have been able to get some more proactive kills, but I don't know if Blessed Shield would have been straight up better this game. I think it might not have been. We also saw him take Falling Sword when he had a Thrall, right? So Sunder was the engage. Yes, I use the camera rotate thing in games all the time. I use the arrow keys a lot to line up known Hogger spins, including pretty much every time I do a camp. Does one need to pick otherwise with Falling Sword? As long as you have Blind 1 and Blind 16, you can always go the Storm Shield, because you get massive CDR. No Neo still coding from Tychus and Necromi Sylvanas seems strange. Do you have any insight on what's... Yeah, we talked about this. Also, this should have been... It's the same player, right? That's actually it's IB Tinks. It's a different player. Yeah, IB Tinks, like, you just... Neo Steel should be the default. Should be a weird game. Cute. Is Totem Rhaegar dead? Totem Rhaegar is not an every game thing anymore. Totem Rhaegar situationally, I think, should still be fine, especially into very heavy auto attack teams. But in general, you're not gonna like pick it every game or anything. It's gonna be maybe 30% of games, maybe, where it's the correct talent choice. Liam is probably the best Hogger in CCL. What are the Hogometrics you're using to evaluate? We went over this a little bit, but it's very difficult, again, to evaluate Hogger players because there's so many things that the hero can be doing, and no one is doing all of them, right? Like, no one is going Hortapult or Shockwave, depending on the draft, right? Some people are just like, I'm always going to go this, or I'm always going to go this. I'm not switching it up very much. And they're two viable heroics that do very, very, very different things. I'll give you an example of something that is pretty difficult to do, that no one has done, and that I do because I frequently do a queue with someone who likes to one-trick Hanzo. which is that I will give Hanzo scatters using Loot Horde and Hortipole. And that's just something we're not seeing people doing. Theoretically, you should also be able to pair Hogger and Diablo and always give Diablo wall stuns. Not seeing anyone doing that. So when I say Liam is the best Hogger in CCL currently, he's performing the best on the hero out of everyone consistently. He's winning more, he's doing more damage, he's getting more wall stuns. He's getting more soak per minute of game time, which means he's clearing waves more efficiently. He's getting more camps. But in a lot of ways, those are the basics of the hero. We haven't seen advanced Hogger play yet. Like, really, we have not. Why is there so much Chromie priority all of a sudden? Didn't think she was picked much last season. Chromie was picked a fair amount last season. But this is just one of those things that happens. As people are like, oh, this hero is good, it doesn't just result in that hero getting picked more, it results in the entire meta changing. I honestly think Chromie was probably underpicked last season, despite the fact that she was played a fair amount. And when she was picked, she tended to be picked later on in drafts. Chromie's fine. And Chromie was really highly prioritized season 1 as well. I think people are just getting more technical in their drafting. And a versatile hero like Chromie is something that when drafts get more technical, heroes that are versatile like Chromie go up in priority. Which is why, like, every season of CCL, I say the level of play has improved substantially. We also have more Chromie players in CCL this season, I think, than seasons 2 and 3. Because obviously a hero's apparent priority is going to change based on how many people are actually playing the hero. I think every Dahaka we've seen in Season 4 has picked Isolation at level 10. Are there scenarios where Adaptation is the better choice? It seems like a very passive option by comparison. Nintori is the only Dahaka player in CCL who I believe has picked Adaptation. He's picked it 4 times in all of CCL, not just Season. And he has a 50% win rate on it. Adaptation is a support heroic on a bruiser. And in order for a support heroic on a bruiser to be good, it has to be used aggressively, which means you have to have a scenario where you can run at the enemy team and Adaptation will cause you not to die, and that will somehow be valuable. That's not as unlikely as it sounds, or as inconsistent as it sounds, but it is not gonna happen as much competitive. Also, in competitive, people can substantially outplay Adaptation by just not doing any damage to you when you pop Adaptation. And that's something we would see very consistently in like HGC, where people would not attack Medivh shields, things like that. It's not as consistent in CCL currently, but I think it is possible to get to a level of play where Adaptation is unpickable. That said, Adaptation actually has the higher win rate on ladder. So if you're purely a ladder player, pick Adaptation, hit the button, and just run at the enemy team. And hopefully your team follows you in, and they pump so much damage into you, and then you don't die, and it's a really effective cooldown trade, and then your team wins the fight as a result. That's the idea. It's like using Divine Shield. Divine Shield used aggressively is always going to be better than Divine Shield used defensively. So if you can find scenarios where you can use Adaptation aggressively, then Adaptation is going to be insane in that game. But I think for the way Dahaka usually plays, that scenario should be fairly rare. And I think whether or not it succeeds is largely up to the enemy team, not you, which I think is a really terrible thing to do in competitive. Bunker is often talked about as a save tool for a team. Which player team is best utilize bunkers to save teammates? Granite Gaming, because Wubby. How do you evaluate a good bunker placement, timing, positioning, etc.? I mean, it depends on it. So bunker shouldn't usually be used. Again, bunker is not a defensive tool. It's a tool that enables you to be offensive. So, for instance, we'll see Blaze flank happen, or even like, yeah, Blaze flanks happen. He'll E in, he'll get a stun, he'll immediately bunker, and it will body block a choke, and then his team is, sandwiching, running in. And then as the team sandwiches, everyone hops in the bunker and starts blazing, on the enemy team. So that you're actually adding CC in the form of body blocking, and you're adding damage, and you added a lot of control with the stun. Or you'll like E in into a mouth comp, get a big stun, and then you'll immediately bunker, and now Malf can't W you, so you can't heal. Blaze bunker is actually one of the single best counters to Malf, period, in the whole game, because Malf cannot heal if everyone's in bunker. Using it defensively, like as a strict counter to things like Entomb, is very positional. And it's honestly the harder way to use bunker. Using things proactively is easier and frequently better than using things defensively. So it's a lot. Nasmus was really good at using bunker. When Nasmus was playing offlane for Oxygen, he just straight up won the game with some bunker. The bunker on core from Wubby was really good, right? That sieging bunkers are a thing. You can use bunker just to like finish off a building and then leave, and the enemy team has no real counterplay to it. So we've only seen that like 3 or 4 times in all of CCL. I think every single one of them. I think one of them is Liam, and the other 3 were Nasmus. All right, so bunker does a lot of things, but you really have to have your team play around bunker for it to do those things. Bunker is not a strong reactive save mechanic the way like cleanse is. Bunker is a proactive save mechanic, like sancting, like Tyrael swords in, sanks, now it's safe for your team to walk there. Bunker can sort of do something very similar to that, where you can proactively enable your team to go into a space. And that's it. This was way longer than I thought it would be. Like, we didn't have that many questions, but they were very in-depth questions. I thought, so 4 pages of questions, which is what I had, is usually like a 2-hour show. We're coming up on 3 hours. We're done, but we're 3-hour show. So thank you guys for the questions. Hopefully I answered them in as much detail as you guys wanted. We are done. I feel like Cascon is typing something. Cascon's right though, never answered who's best. Wait, did I not? Oh, who the best player in CCL is? You can't, I deleted that question. The best player in CCL is not something that you can objectively answer. Like, everyone has strengths and weaknesses. Even when people would say Rich was the best player to ever play HOTS, like, I didn't agree with that. Because Rich was very good at some things and really bad at other things. You ask me who the best drafter of all time is, I'll say Noblesse, because he was. You ask me who the best Alarak of all time was, I'll say Rich, because he was. But you ask me who was the best person at drafting Alarak, it wasn't Rich. It was Noblesse. Noblesse is the one who sort of cracked the formula to be like, when can you draft Alarak and have it be good? And Rich could play Alarak, but Rich couldn't draft Alarak. So like, you gotta, and like who the best overall player is when you have that many different things. Like, that's one example, right? Who's the best overall player when you have that many things? It doesn't work. Anyway, that's gonna be it for I'm not answering who is the best coach in CCL. That's going to be it for the show. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it a lot. I will find someone to host. But in the meanwhile, remember, this is a stream where we never lose. We always win, or we learn something. Learning is always a win. Have a good night, everyone.